I will stop this. I just,
What's that property?
I'm ready to give
Okay. Good, welcome, friends, neighbors, colleagues, guests. We're about to open our meeting tonight with a public hearing. First on the agenda is an open public hearing on the item entitled Land Rezone Certified Map Request made on behalf of Mr. Fortson. Mr. Fortson here, that you have?
No, but I'm here. I'm Bob Talarzik, the surveyor.
Bob, would you come up and introduce yourself and address the group? And tell us all how you're related to this particular position.
I'm the land surveyor working for Mr. Thorson. He currently owns this lot one. It's a certified survey map. That's, you see the dashed line here. All the way out to the road, and he wishes to acquire this additional land from the neighbors. The Wentz. I believe that additional holds at 1.47 acres. It's just gonna, once approved and recorded, it just fuses into one larger lot.
And you're involved as the surveyor of the property,
Yes,
the author of the certified survey map? That's you, got your spelling correct. What would you like to tell us about this proposed project?
there's not much to say. They just wanted to expand their lot and had an opportunity to do so. So, you know, in dealing with zoning and setbacks, I mean, there is a septic here, septic vents, so I had a discussion with Dane County Health regarding, you know, making sure we were far enough away from those and far enough, you know, and I according to the zoning code, made sure we were far enough away from these buildings, so I was showing them and dimensioning them. That's it.
Okay, and there will be a zoning change required for this. to
Yes,
take
this
place?
is FP 35 exclusive ag zoning for the land that he's acquiring into his lot, which is a residential zoning.
So it's taking 1.47 acres out of farmland preservation and adding it to the residential.
Correct.
Have you been in contact with the seller of the property? Or the yeah, with the neighbor.
I have not personally spoke with them. I mean, he has. I mean, they will have to sign this certified survey map, you know, for it to move forward and get recorded. So, and I have been in contact with the village of Brooklyn as far as extraterritorial plat review, which is all within that, and they have already approved it. So
They have.
Yeah.
So we're second in line.
yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it was kind of happened pretty quick there. So.
This is a public hearing. Anybody have any questions of the commission at this time? Anyone from the public have an interest in speaking up in some way on this matter? Okay, hearing nothing. Harold.
Yep, just to confirm, you have the 3.95 acres that this lot becomes. Because it is, it cannot be divided into two lots, since we have a 2-acre requirement. Is the buyer aware of this?
I don't know. I mean, I can make him aware.
If you could
Yeah.
make sure it doesn't have plans to create another lot.
Yeah, I'll mention it to him. I mean, I know that's not what their intention is right now, but who knows what the future So I'll mention.
Somebody did write in there, no new building lots.
No additional,
No new buildable lots are being
Correct.
proposed. So you
Correct.
wrote that. So
Yes.
somebody needs to know.
right,
Hello, this is Sandy Went and Bill
This-
Thorson.
be confusing, that it's a simple sort of advance of land between adjoining landowners, so there's no new lots. No lots.
Is there somebody from the public on Zoom that would like to speak?
Yes, this is Sandy Went and Bill Thorson.
The
We are
petitioners.
the,
Please go ahead, ma'am.
this is Sandy Went and Bill Thorson. We are, that Wilfred and Dorothy are my parents. And yes, they are aware. We do not plan on building anything on that property. Or splitting the property.
Thank you.
There being no further matters, I can close the public hearing at this time, Stephanie, is that correct?
For this,
For this matter?
yes. We move on to the next. Well, I mean, you just move on to the next. Keep your public hearing open, move on to the next one.
Okay, good, thank you, sir. The next matter on the agenda and part of the open public hearing is another land lease zone certified survey map request. This involves Eric Wilbur, are you here? Speak to you. There you go. From the front and address the group, please. Sure.
So this is part of the Keller farm. Keller's had roughly 200 acres. And a couple of years ago, they sold 134 acres to Jason Marshall. When they did that, Jason agreed that he only wanted one of the building rights. So there was a deed restriction put in place. The Kellers did this with their attorney. And Jason has the 134 acres, he has one development right with your town ordinance. Remaining splits, the Keller family kept with 61 acres plus or minus. And that's spelled out in their deed restriction that you probably have a copy of now. So the Kellers are selling the 61 acres. Actually, I'm buying it, my wife and I. And it has 4 or more development rights. So we have chosen to create 3 lots out at the road. And then give ourselves 1 lot that would be for us to build on. That would be lot number 4. The remainder of the land is roughly 38 acres. And that's up here. That 38 acres would stay with its current zoning FP 35.
On preservation.
Farm preservation. We did put in the certified survey map. Just because we figured Dane County would want it, you might want it, that is, there's an easement that'll get recorded. For access to this 35 acres, we plan on keeping it, but you know, 10 years from now, time changes. If someone else ended up owning it, like one of the adjacent neighbors, they might need another access point to it, so. My experience is Dane County typically would want that easement, so we did put that on the survey map. So we tried to follow the land use plan 2 years ago when the Keller started this venture. The goal was to preserve as much ag land as possible. So their first sale was just that, you know, they sold it with 1 development right and kept the rest of it with the 61 acres. 61 acres has roughly 20-25 acres of tillable and about 30 acres of woods. The woods is too far off the road to put home sites back there. Driveways would be too long. So this seemed to be the best concept to allow for them to use their splits and get the value of the farm that they've had all these years. So that's why the splits were put out at the road.
Okay, now, for purposes of my question, would you just focus on how the splits were used when the property was bought by the farmland was bought by a new owner, Jason Marshall? That only one split stayed with that big.
Yeah, and that was verified by the county. They sent over the documents that show the deed restriction that, you know, the Kellers could have created this first and used their splits and then sold Jason the rest of it with one split. They did it the reverse. Because they knew Jason didn't want to pay for the splits. He didn't need 4 more homes. He didn't want to go through the development process that it takes to do it. He was more interested in the ag. So he bought the ag land with one home site just in case, because it's not his home. He doesn't live on that farm, so keeping one development right with the 134 acre seemed to make good sense. So when he did buy it, that was negotiated into one development, right? The remainder stayed with 61 acres.
And although it has one development right, it can stay as farm preservation 35 zoning. Part that you would take, excuse me, still farm preservation land that Jason has purchased.
Yeah, I believe it all is in farm preservation, all of his 34 acres, I believe it's in farm preservation.
And then that left 61 acres, if I understood you correctly. And your proposal here involves, excuse me, I did the math in a hurry. 24 acres. Your proposal involves 24 of the 61 acres, is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yeah, it's approximately 24 acres that would be rezoned.
Okay.
There's 11 acre parcel that went right to the parcel line, so that's where the parcel line. When you look at the shape of it, the back line of 11 acres is really the parcel line. So we stayed on the front parcel. There's 3 parcels that are part of that 60 tax parcels that are part of that 61 acres. The back 2 parcels are currently zoned FP 35, actually all of it's on FP 35. So just the front piece is being involved in rezoning. That makes sense?
I'm following it, yep. And your intention in doing this is to have then 3 sellable 2 acre lots, is that the idea?
These lots are actually, they're like 3.5 acres. This is where the lot line was established when Jason bought his. So this is 3.5, and just shy of 4.
So the applicable zoning would be RR2 for all 3 of those, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
You're talking about you still have 30.
There's about 38 acres that won't be rezoned.
Okay, where is that?
It's easier to show it to you on a separate map, but it's actually, there's a chunk that goes right here, and then there's a chunk back here.
In the wood zone, FP 35?
Yep.
So that's what you need the access for. It has no road frontage.
Yeah, the only reason there's an access there is because it has no road frontage, and this becomes a separate parcel once it's rezoned. So it'll have its own parcel number, and it also, you know, it's got its own identity because it'll be lot number 4 CSM number. And so that legal description is, you know, if something happened to me and Martha and we sold this. Let's say the horse farm wanted to buy this. Well, this would give them another access point just for getting back to their cropland. So they wouldn't have to go through their farm to get to it. There would be another access point. It's not really necessary, but I've been in front of the county enough times to know that more than likely they will ask for it. So I'm just telling you, we put it on the map ahead of time.
And there's gonna be one split that could be available for that parcel that's not being rezoned, correct?
The 61 acres, according to your density unit that was established by the, the county, shows 4.63 splits. Your roundup effect essentially says that that means there's 5. Jason Marshall has 1. So that remains that there's 6. Jason Marco has 1 and there's 5 remaining on the 61 acres. So there is 1, but the rules in Dane County are that you can create a 4-lot CSM once every 5 years. So the only way I could come to you and ask for all 5 of them right now is I would have to do a plat. And we're not interested in doing that. We're really not interested in another home back there. It would be too long a driveway to put one back there. So my goal is that potentially someday it might be something that I can transfer. I still will own it because of your guidelines. But we've chosen to do 4 because the 4-lot CSM rule that is applied. That makes sense.
Yeah, but so you're just basically leaving it FP 35 instead of including it in your parcel number 4, which you don't want to do. I'm assuming.
Well, if I included it with my parcel number 4, my parcel wouldn't really have a zoning. I'd still have to rezone it. Because we would have more than 35 acres. And so to create my building parcel, we chose just to go to the parcel line and make it simple because the remainder is more than 35. So it was easy to leave it FP 35 and don't touch it.
2 more questions. One more. How much cropland would you be able to still lease out on the property?
Well, more than likely our home site is going to be, somewhere right in here.
Before that line of trees?
Yeah. Yep. So more than likely there's a shared driveway that goes to this home site that would be somewhere in here. And then to our home. More than likely. A shared driveway that would go here and go to this home and this home. So depending on where they put their homes, Jason might end up cropping some of this. And this will stay in ag. This will stay in ag. There's a little field back here that will stay in ag. So anything that's ag in the FP 35 will stay in ag. There's probably a total of, with 4 lots, you're probably looking at a good 6 to 8 acres that will come out of production. Because of driveways and homestead. But overall, I think Kellers did a pretty good job by doing it this way because they preserved about 190 acres. Doesn't get developed. Really hard to picture this with 5 lots. Doesn't lay out very well at all. And it doesn't work right now anyways for us to do that.
And last question is, does Marshall own that little sliver between lot 1 and the current home?
Yep,
Okay.
it's a pretty good sliver. He owns this. And then there's a home right here on 5 acres, 4 acres. So there's a chance that if Jason ever did create a home site, it'd be one side or the other of this house. Just, practicality, that's more likely where it would fit. It's over here, he's got some wetlands over off of Glenway and Alpine. So there's really no good spot over there to put any homes. He wouldn't want to put it in the middle of his crop field. I think he He wanted it when he purchased for one reason, and that was that it helped the value of his farm long term. By having that one building site available to the farm.
Anybody else have any questions as part of the public hearing? Sure.
You said that remaining acreage beyond lot 4 wouldn't have a legal description. Does it not have to have a legal description?
It doesn't have to have a legal description. The legal description it has right now is there's 2 tax parcels. So, you know, the only legal that it really has, there's no I mean, we have a survey on it, but there's no CSM for it.
No, that I understand. But when you take ownership to that whole property and you take off the 4 lots, you still have to have a legal description of some kind for that remaining acreage, correct?
Yeah, and the current legal is the tax parcel legal.
Meets and bounds
It's a
description, no
legal
lot.
description, yeah. So there is actually a survey that was done by the Kellers when they sold adjacent of the whole farm.
Mhm.
And then there's a survey of just the piece they sold them. The only part of the survey that's never been really solidified is the 61 acres. So our purchase is 3 tax parcels.
Okay.
And, you know, one of them is gonna get true legals because this will happen
Right,
if it happens. If this is approved, this will be legal lot 1, 2, 3, 4 of CSM.
Right.
And then the remainder will keep its tax parcel legal description. That's part of why we kept that line right where it was. We didn't have to mess with that. 'Cause if we would have moved this line for this lot, it automatically makes us have to do potentially a legal description and a survey, so to speak, for that remaining 38 acres. And we don't really need it. So it's kind of like, we could spend the money for it, but at this point, it's not really needed. There's survey stakes out there on all those corners just because the whole farm was surveyed. The only one that doesn't have a stake right now is this point and this point. They will go there when the survey, when the CSM is completed, they'll have to put all of those in.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Stephanie, do you have that aerial photo of this parcel that sort of shows this? We do have new members. I don't think have seen that new aerial photo.
Yeah, was that in last week's?
yeah.
It was. If not in this packet, which I thought was.
There,
Is that the one?
that's it. You see that
Yeah, I'm looking at it online,
online?
but if you, oh. you got
And I can do it on
I
accident.
got it.
Okay.
There you go.
Never mind.
Thank
Actually,
you.
can I see that just to see where the one?
You see- you see your- oh, the one from the keep on. Yeah.
The other, if there's any questions during the public hearing? That's okay. Right, then,
Ask the public if they have any.
that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Anybody in attendance online or in person who has any comment or question regarding public hearing portion of this? Yeah. Yes, sir. Please identify yourself. And
Dave Becker, my wife Katie. We own property probably from here to here along the side of this. Now, he has mentioned a 66-foot easement through here and yet another driveway here to your place, right? So what's going to happen to the 66-foot easement that's going to be join our property line? Is that going to grow up to weeds or how's it going to be taken care of?
It's really more of a formality. There's not gonna be anything there. Meaning there's no road, there's no drive lane.
At this point,
Well, the only way there would ever be one is the back piece would have to be sold off to someone.
it belongs to you.
Yep, and then there would have to be, you know, for purposes of a true access easement. typically that's a document that shows that for the purposes of access, the owner of the 38 acres would be able to cut their laneway in for access. Keep in mind, I'm really only putting, I'd rather not have the easement. Okay. I'm putting the easement there because I believe Dane County is gonna have it as one of the requirements.
My question is, are you gonna keep it mowed or looking decent?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, my property is gonna be the best one on the road.
Okay, we'll take your word. You'll. Other thing I'd like to clarify, you mentioned Jason having a split. As I understand it, he has a building site. He does not have a split. All the splits went here. I know Jason, I've known him since he was a little squirt. And that's the way that stacks up. So I say that's the other thing, I guess now, when houses are built along these lots, this is gonna take away our view on the open fields we've had for 19 years, which, so be it. Is there a setback from the road or to the back? What are the rules on whether they can put that house anywhere between the road, 400 feet back? Is that it?
You know the answer to that? Andy?
No, I don't know what that. Dane County has restrictions when you build a house or sheds. You gotta be so far from your back lot line, neighbor's lot line. I don't know about the top of my head, but yes, there are bill or regulations for where structures have to go in relation to your lot line.
Okay, well,
We just can't answer that particular question unless we don't know.
right now, all right. Okay. I guess that's about the only thing I have to add. The only thing I'm gonna add to that is, Metro Grow has been saturating that land over and over and over again, so I don't. I hope anybody that wants to buy a lot there, get the soil test, because our well, which is right near our nitrate level, is just that close to being too much. It's been coming up over the years. That's all I.
Well, thank you for speaking up. Do you have a clear understanding now what the split situation is with?
Oh, I understand. We understand the split. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I might have misspoke if I said split because it's, splits and development rights are kind of sometimes misused a little bit. Jason has one development right.
He's site.
Yeah, so it's a development right and it's not a split.
Maybe a potential split would be a better definition.
Yeah.
Yes,
Split
possibility.
sometimes means you have two, right? And because if you're splitting, and sometimes that means you have two, and he really doesn't have the right to. He has the right to split it if he keeps everything FP 35 and he creates a home site. He has one home site.
So he can split it up.
He can split it off.
Okay. That's not the way he's phrased it. Whatever. No, that's not my concern.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak up on this matter? Commissioners? All right, then I'm closing the public hearing at this time. And moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the call to plan commission. There's a word. Thanks for coming in, folks. Stephanie, you know the time we're going to start, and we're going to begin with roll call.
Okay, Chuck Soul.
Here.
Andy Blumstrom.
Here.
Tim Yanachek.
Here.
Ron Kai.
Here.
Gina Larson. Dave Hageman.
Here.
Here.
Then we moved right back where we began with the petition ending with the numbers 11877. It's Mr. Thorson's property.
Yes.
Bob, you're still here?
Yep.
Here's where we discuss and take action. Everyone's has the Dane County rezone position in their possession for their review. Anybody have any more questions? Because it's time.
The lot that the acreage is coming from, what will be the remaining acreage of that lot?
Can you answer that?
Oh, it's quite a bit. It goes back quite a distance from that Union Road.
It's well over 35.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Taking 4 acres out of it is not gonna change that, so.
No, and they're only taking the 1.47, so.
Do you have an idea of what the party's intentions are by doing this? Building?
No, they just wanted to add on to their lot. They just had a lot there they enjoyed and had an opportunity to buy a little bit more and taking it.
Anybody else have anything to ask now that we're in the formal portion? Okay. Looking for a motion to recommend or oppose this petition.
I'll make a motion to approve petition number DCPREZ dash 2022 dash 11877.
Is there a second? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion to approve, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Consider unanimous. It's been approved.
Thank you.
Go back to Alpine Road. Eric, go over again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you don't have to stand up. We know where we are.
Okay.
Any further discussion or information the commissioners wish to have? Sure.
The question I have, again, and I apologize, Eric. You indicated that there would be joint driveways on the lots. I believe it's our policy that joint driveway agreements are in place and recorded, ready to be recorded along with certified survey map.
I wasn't aware of it, but that would be.
Is that
would
not a
be fine.
requirement of our plan commission?
Dave is nodding and
It has been in the
that
past,
confirms what I believe too.
because otherwise they get forgotten and then they're hard to recreate. So I think we moved a while back. That joint driveway agreements are generated at the time when there are 2 lots. Sure.
Right. And the CSM doesn't get recorded until they're ready to be recorded.
Is it the preference of the town to see shared driveways?
I don't know that I personally, speaking on behalf of my commission, have a preference. I think it's what the developer or what landowners want. But we do know that it creates problems if one is created later. Because sometimes parties can't come to an agreement. So it's just easier if you're going to have a shared driveway that it is done at CSM time.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned shared driveways is, not knowing whether or not the town had a preference. I see it both ways. Sometimes, it's less intrusion on the land. But then at the same time, you're dealing with 2 owners that one takes great pride in their driveway and the other one perhaps doesn't.
That's why you have all of that spelled out in an agreement prior to
yeah.
them purchasing the property.
Right. So I think if it's safe to say this, that if we're gonna have shared driveway agreements, if it ends up being that way, and part of that, Sharon, would be that there's a couple parties that already have interest in the lots. So if they prefer for cost effectiveness and so forth to have shared driveways, then we would have a very good shared driveway maintenance agreement in place before we move forward to CSM.
I think another reason for the town's preference for shared driveways is that limits access to the road. Fewer people come pulling in and pulling out again. So that is a safety factor for traffic.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that I support shared drive. And you own all this now, you can write your own shared
Yeah.
driveway agreements and sign it yourself, right?
Well, I would hire someone that knows more than me on how to write it.
Standard forms out there, I understand. But, okay, so you're clear now, and that is our preference.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Anybody else have any questions before we ask for a motion on this?
Just one question, Eric, on your lot 4. That's where you guys are building your house
Right.
with possible down the road. TDRs and stuff. Would you ever foresee you would put another one on there if it became available some way? Another structure house?
Well, it currently does have one more split. I mean, one more development, right?
Right.
But I don't see the room for it, you know, once I build a house, I'm not gonna wanna put another one back there. So if there's a TDR, you call it, it would be more of a move off of our property onto someone else's property that the town approved.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion for approval or disapproval of this particular petition?
I'll make a motion to approve petition DCPREZ 2022-11883 with the condition that if there's going to be a joint driveway agreement and a shared driveway, that is in place before the CSMs are created. You say that right, Sharon?
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Can I get a clarification, please?
Please.
Is there gonna be one shared driveway agreement or two shared driveway agreements? For lots 3 and 4 and 1 and 2?
There would need to be two.
Yeah, that's correct. I'll amend that to say 2 driveway agreements. If there are shared driveways between lot 1 and 2. And if there's a shared driveway between lot 3 and 4.
Clear that up for you?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And that's what our motion is. Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion is carried for approval. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
September 6th. Recommendation from the planning commission.
Thank you.
Item number 9 on our agenda is approval of the minutes from last month's meeting on July 19th.
I will make the approval for the minutes of the July meeting.
Second. I'm second. Just first, second. I got it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Move on to item number 10, which is our period of public comment. One resident has requested the opportunity to speak. Still Peterson present? Would you like to address the group as part of the public comments?
Okay, well, thank you. What we have been thinking of doing is start off with up here at number 4. This little sliver of land here, I get a tax bill on it. And I'd like to just combine that sliver of land with this number 4. That's just to clear up a lot. And then we'd be creating 2 new lots. That would be 1 and 2 here. Probably none of you have been back on Lazarus Road. We don't know what we got back there.
Are we welcome to? visit?
Yeah, you know, there's a toll, but you know. As you drive in on the right-hand side, that's the house that my wife and I have. And we got, this is the proposed one. It would end up with 7.5 acres in that. Then there's a rental home here on lot 2. And that's a couple of acres there. And then there's this, all this is farmland around it. Now, here, there's a lot of woods that are in fringes on here. And so this 4 or 5 acres in here is always kind of a, if you're running a corn planter or a combine, it's not, there's always words said about first of all, the rows aren't straight and you can't get in there and it's hard to turn around. So it's kind of clearing up that, but it does create 2 buildable lots. And that's what we're talking about doing. And so I'm just here to find out what we need to do.
You're within that zone where we have to consult with the village on matters such as this.
We are, you say?
I-
Yeah, I guess we're within that territorial system, yeah.
Are we the first group you're approaching on?
Yeah, this is it. Initial virgin meeting. But we've got, we have gone to the extent of having a surveyor do this so we could see whether or not it was feasible or not.
And that's Lathers Road. On which boundary? On your survey map, I didn't see where or is this farther off the road? The road itself is not shown on here, right?
Here's Lathers Road right here. It comes in
That's-
back to our cul-de-sac, back where we live.
And is there a cul-de-sac there right now?
Yeah,
Who maintains that?
town does.
Town?
It's a town cul-de-sac.
All right, and this is public comment period. Any questions from commissioners? Arlen?
Yeah, Bill, you said lot 4 already exists?
Lot 4 exists, yes, but it's just, there was a house on it, Arlen, years ago. But it became out of disrepair, and so we took it down. That's a number of years ago now.
Okay, so in that you're talking about adding,
So we'd be adding this partial, this little bit up here to that lot 4.
will that, but that still does not make that a 2-acre parcel.
No, probably doesn't. Whatever, no. It'd be, what is it? I would say just a little over an acre.
Okay, so we have, if you're changing property lines from an existing lot, I believe we have to make it comply with our requirements, which would be a 2-acre parcel. So if I'm
I
understanding.
hope not.
Brad, help me out here, but I believe that if you have, it's an existing lot that exists, period. If you're adding to it, I think it has to, and creating a new, basically a new lot, you have to be the 2 acres.
Well, then
I know that that's true for newly created lots under your plan. Whether that applies to reducing sort of a non-conforming lot, if you will, so in, I'd have to look at the specific language of your plan. I don't have that in front of me. But I can tell you that, in the zoning world, for example, if you're reducing a lot's non-conformities, you're making it closer to conforming. There's often, some exceptions made for that, so that even if it's not, doesn't meet the standard that you would have for a new lot created, you're bringing it closer into compliance. And that is often permissible, but I would have to look at the specific language of your plan on that regard.
Would that have to possibly go before the Board of Adjustment?
No, I don't think so, not in this case, because you wouldn't be violating any zoning laws here. We have zoning that can accommodate lots smaller than 2 acres. It would be simply just a matter of whether the plan commission determined it was consistent with the town plan. But there wouldn't be any county ordinance impact of that, just whether or not it complies with the standard of the town plan.
there used to be a house on here and Spill removed the house. So he's got a right to build another house.
On the lot.
So basically, all he's doing is adding on to the lot.
That's right, but
Changing the lot.
you'd be creating a new lot Because if you're creating a new CSM lot, which is smaller than 2 acres. Yeah. But under those circumstances, that's where I would defer to the language in your plan.
So something to a legal detail to get.
And where would we go to get that clarified?
Here, why don't I look it up while you're talking?
He's here, we can probably do
You
that.
don't have to go anywhere. You can just.
Right here. We've seen this before. People take a lot in a residential area and they buy some more land and add it to their lot. We just did it tonight.
Oh, yeah.
It was a conforming lot.
Yeah, but this is an existing lot.
It's existing lot, but it's not.
So all he's doing, whether there was a house on there or not, is immaterial. But all he's doing is adding some more land to it. And I think he has every right to do that.
Let's find out that question.
Andy, so there was a house there. How long ago did that house go down, Phil?
Time goes.
But the house
10 years.
existed after 94.
I guess my question is, without looking at our thing, because he's gonna put a new house, a house replacement. The old
Yeah,
house is gone, so
replacement,
he doesn't have to worry about the time span. But because it was a house there, do we have anything that the new house has to stay within a certain area of where the old house was or not?
That's a good point. I don't.
Can't remember on our house replacement agreement what goes on. I would think, like, say, because there was a house there, there's no reason there can't be a house put on there now. And then, so that split you've had since 94.
Being largest a lot, I think the setbacks would apply then.
Yeah.
You know, your side yard of 20 feet or whatever it is.
This
would
is
apply
an
to that.
agricultural transition. Is that the plan area?
That is in the transition
It is in the transition.
area outside of the village.
So let's see here.
You're creating 2 new lots, the one and 2 at the bottom, along the southern property line there. There's in lot 2, there's an existing house, or it's an existing lot.
These are fields, part of the agricultural field.
Okay, but so they're creating 2 new lots there. And you have 3 existing lots. Where what appears to be a house on a 7.8 acre. To the left.
Yeah, there's a house here. Yeah.
To the right,
Where I live, yeah.
where it says lot 2, CSM 3603. That's also an existing house lot in the middle there.
Right here?
Yes.
There's a house there, yes.
Yeah, so that's existing. And so the only one that I guess we have a question, make sure we get it, that it's a doable thing to be able to add to lot number 4 up there.
So I mean, what I'm having trouble finding specific policies for the agricultural transition zone, but what it seems the town plan says pretty consistently is for the minimum lot size to be required is at least 2 acres or as defined by the applicable standards of the appropriate zoning category. Doesn't really specify whether you can bring a non-compliant lot closer to that standard or not. Given the fact that the town plan doesn't actually say one way or the other, I think that's really the discretion of the plan commission and the town board as to how to interpret that. So if that's something that you want to allow, you know, to say, if you've got something that is less than 2 acres and you're gonna make it bigger, but not up to 2 acres. So you're gonna make it better, if not perfect. Whether or not to allow that, I think there's nothing in the plan that would really say whether that should be allowed or shouldn't be. So I think that's really a discretion, plan commission and town board discretion.
Okay, so that's something that this board can deal with.
Yeah.
Phil, realizing we can't take action on the proposal tonight, but what they're inquiring about is how are we feeling about combining the two up there and getting rid of one of the tax parcels? and combining them?
Never thought it was an issue,
Okay,
but that's all
all right,
right.
it doesn't, we gotta talk about it. And will you also be asking for anything else to change formally?
Yeah, we'd be creating lot 1 and 2. You're changing the boundary of your existing lot too, right? And that's correct, yeah.
Do you mind my asking how much total land you own?
300 acres.
Okay, all right. So that's not, if you own other land beyond what.
Yeah, I got 9 splits, I think.
Okay, gotcha.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, what would you like to say?
So you guys know I have clearly been doing something similar to this gentleman is trying to do. Ran into different obstacles. So I'm just wondering, since we agreed to put the language for our property in the new plan, would his questionable acreage be covered to add that underneath our new language? So like if you pass the language that says something along the lines of if your house was established between 1994 and it was already zoned and all this stuff, you can meet less than the 2 acre requirement. Would it also solve his problem here as well? Was his property line established prior to 1994? So I just want to point that out since like I'm in the process of that. Obviously, he would have to wait as long as I have been, but if you,
So this is the two is very similar situation.
yeah.
Right.
The only difference is he's making his more conforming. I have no options to make mine more conforming. I can do nothing but work with what I have. So like, I think that's the gray area, but what I'm saying is if you're not willing to work within that gray area, if that language would also help him, I just want to throw that out there.
Let's assume that I never said anything about bringing this parcel in. But I came to you and wanted to build a house on lot 4. What would be the answer?
Get buildings on that.
I mean, there's no problem. Just go ahead and do it.
And it's replacing our.
Yeah, I would say the
Well,
whole
if the
replacement.
house has been gone. Even if the house has been gone for 10 years, it's an existing.
It was a log cabin in 1848. It's a replacement. It's fine.
It's an existing lot. And it's buildable. Non-conforming. Yep.
No, I don't want to do that, but I mean, that's, I was just thinking in my own mind, it saves me another tax slip. Combine the two and
It's beginning to sound, if what Brian is saying, that could be at the discretion of this, commission recommending to the town board and the town board making action. I would still, because you're in the ag transition with area, which the village has defined as something in the next 5 to 20 years, they expect this to be developed as part of it, incorporated into the village. So I think you need to be talking to them about the creation of these 2 lots.
And I understand you have an application for a density study.
pardon me,
You have an application for a density study with us.
it's filed, yeah.
Okay, that's probably going to be useful information for the village as well. So you may want to wait to get that in hand before you talk.
Sharon, do you have something?
Phil, did you have to do a density study when you sold that piece of property to the landscaping business? So that density study would still apply, right?
It hasn't changed since then. Yeah.
I mean, that was just.
These are 2 different farms.
Oh,
Yeah, but-
it is.
Shouldn't a density study have covered all this lands contiguous or not?
Under the current wording of the town plan or under the proposed wording of the town plan?
What was in place when he did it?
I don't know that would be.
Our new land.
In the new one that will be
Did-
clear.
Did you, Phil, did you own where the landscaping firm was? Did you own that in 1994?
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
long time.
You read that somewhere, Sharon, you weren't here. 94.
Well, yeah, I was here, not here.
We caught pre-tornado in our land.
Right.
Pre-tornado,
But
yes.
with this lot, to me, it makes no sense to not join the two together. The piece that he's joining has no viable use for anything. He can't build on it. Nobody buy it.
Well, it's
Unless they
part of
were
his
gonna
farm.
put a,
It's part of the field that, his other field that surrounds it.
yes, but as a farmer, you don't do anything with that little bitty strip of land. So it only enhances that lot, whether Phil decides he wants to sell it or not, that's irrelevant. But I understand where he's coming from, because it makes no sense to have a separate tax bill for this little sliver of land that belongs nowhere. I mean, obviously, it isn't a part of the big field next to it, or he wouldn't have a separate tax bill.
Well, it also makes sense to have enlarge that lot a little bit, because he has to get a septic and a
Right.
well in there, or he has to share a well.
Yeah.
And that
Should-
also makes that more viable too.
Should he ever want to do
And more
anything.
than likely, he'll share, I don't know, probably share a well there. So you don't know, because that'll be down the road a ways. Yeah, I won't worry about it.
Well, either way.
But it makes a more viable lot and more desirable lot. And, you know.
It makes perfect common sense to include it in lot
Right.
4. Phil, I just got one question, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but so the field to the east of this butts up to the village.
This field here,
Yeah,
yeah, this is the village line right there.
how much acres is in that field?
80 acres, 85.
So
The village boundary is where?
Back into the burger.
Right here.
Neighborhood, right?
That line there. Well, that looks like the edge of the. Edge of the paper.
Yeah,
So
there's 80 acres in, you know, from here down and around, up through here, yeah. And that field.
So just to prepare you, the village, you know, they may say, well, they may think about annex or something. It would stop if you did this, likely the annexation would then come up to this edge of those lots, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the village.
Right.
I can say that, you know, if and when this, whatever happens to it, I'm kind of looking for this here to be part of this township.
Right, right. I'm just
I
saying,
hope so too.
yeah, we do too, but like I say, when you talk to the village, you may find a different voice.
I don't know.
Does that help you understand where we're coming from?
Yeah.
Nobody came up with any really good reason not to do it.
And that we have the authority to, it appears like there's an authority within the town to allow what you're planning to do.
Slower, it's like.
If, but it's not. We need the proposal, we're putting proposal, sir.
So how far is it? How long is that driveway getting off of the road back? to
Half a
the-
mile.
Yeah.
Flanders Road.
Okay.
Half a mile.
And members of the public, like a commissioner, can just drive up Lathers Road and take a look at this. place.
Yeah, come on up. But, you know, if you want coffee, you gotta call ahead. So, is there any issues as far as these two lots are concerned? I mean, they're 2 acres. And we purposely made them 2 acres because I knew that's what that's what our ordinances are.
But they're fronting on, if you have the development rights, they're fronting on a public road.
Yeah.
That gives it, right now that has the appearance of being permitted.
And just keep in mind, the village has a right to say something about it.
Yeah, and you know, they front on the cul-de-sac and then they also front, here's the golf course right here.
Oh, that's nice.
So, yeah, they're prime lots. I mean, but let's keep them in the township. It's probably the best use for the land, because like you said, it's awkward to get in there and try to, you know, if we were doing it right, we should cut down a few limbs. But if you don't do that, if you're.
So Bill, the other two lots closest to the road. Are there still existing driveways coming onto Lathers for those lots?
Now, let's see, what two lots, Dave, are you?
Okay, so the
Number
renter,
four.
the renter lot, he's got a driveway, I assume, onto Lathers.
Say that again, then?
The middle lot there where your renter is,
Yeah, here,
obviously, he's got a driveway onto Lathers or the cul-de-sac right now.
that's correct, yeah.
Okay, does the top lot have remnants of the driveway that was there when the house was there?
Number 4.
Might there be a field driveway there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a drive and there's a garage there.
Okay, okay.
That was part of the house.
Okay.
But the house we took down and left the garage.
Anybody else have any questions during this period of public comment?
So I guess my word is, get my density study, talk to the village, then I'll be back here to talk to you guys in another month. Is that the plan?
Still have the right paper.
Seems like it.
I'd check your density study before you went to get another one. Just to look at it.
Yeah, if it included that property in there, then
So are you saying the new, under the new terms, it would include both property?
Yeah, but we don't have new terms yet. We're just
Okay.
working on those.
So,
so
So
just if you have a previous density study, if it included this portion of the property
Yeah.
in the map, you can probably use that one. If it did not include this portion of the property, you'll need a new density. study.
another $120. Already. Little clarification.
that's why I'm telling you.
According to the Anderson rule, they don't have to be contiguous, and if we were going by that. And if he has lots available on his other farm, doesn't matter.
He has lots available on his
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's what matters.
So. Are we thinking that I've already paid my $120, I'm good to go?
I think so, yes.
You do?
Yeah.
That's what we're hoping.
I already sent the letter in the other day, which never dawned on me that.
You can call them and say, hey, I actually don't, or you might even say, oh, your density study includes this property.
If, I'll tell you what, I'll take a look at it and,
Well, Standing's on a vacation for a week, so.
He's
this is, I'm right here.
Oh, you got a letter coming, all right. Hey, I found the employee, according to your email, you're on vacation. Email?
He just
Or
leaves it
you're-
on permanently.
I should have turned that off.
Yeah. All right, anything else?
No, thank you. for
All right,
coming.
thank you.
Appreciate that. Anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment here in front of this audience? Moving on to item 11 in our agenda, which is review and possible action regarding the update of the township land use plan and the land use chapter review. And for that, I would like to introduce Brian Stanton. Our representative.
Yeah. So what I was asked to talk about today was to try and get a couple of things. I mean, first off, I did send you a revised draft of chapter 8, which is the land use chapter. I think I addressed most of the questions that Commissioner Kai provided to me, and then some of the rest I want to talk about. And then some of the other things that Tim asked was try to get a handle on how much development potential does the plan need to have to accommodate what expected growth in the town of Oregon would be. So that's a big part of what I want to talk about today. So
Which map do you want?
this one's fine. We can start
This
with
one
it.
or this one?
Let's
I
see
don't know
here.
the difference. You tell me.
Let's go with this one here.
Okay,
So, based on our previous discussions with the Plan Commission, I recognize there's some new members of the Plan Commission here who may not have been, party of all the discussions we've had over the last 3 years, but this is the draft of the land use map for the new comprehensive plan for the town of Oregon. And there's basically 4 major categories for planning categories: farmland preservation, rural mixed use, transitional, and traditional subdivision in this version of the map. Most of these have a density policy of 1 unit per 35 acres. So in farmland preservation and rural mixed use and in transitional, as currently drafted, we've gone through a couple different iterations here with some different options. But based on our last conversations, each of those have a density policy of 1 per 35, 1 unit per 35 acres. Traditional subdivision, however, and this is true in your current plan as well, has a 2 acre one, so you can divide all that land up down to 2 acre lots. When the previous plan was mapped, these areas outlined in red were classified in that traditional subdivision category. And yet they're 4 acres or larger in size. What that means is under your current plan, those lots could redivide, provided they meet all the other criteria that we're just talking about. You know, you're creating 2 acre lots, you've got road frontage, or there's driveway agreements, et cetera, right? But everything else being equal, assuming, you know, they can meet all those criteria, you could divide each of those lots outlined in red on this map into 2 or sometimes more lots. There's a total of 49 of those. And you could potentially have as many as 65 new lots. So you've got the existing lots, you could at least create perhaps 65 new home sites based on their acreage, you know, with what's there now. So that's some development potential, right? There's 65 potential new home sites just from these larger lots in the traditional subdivision category. In addition, when you total up, and this is a rough estimate, but if you take a look at all the areas that are in farmland preservation, that are in transition, that don't have deed restrictions on them saying that splits are used up, and are still in FP 35 or AT 35 zoning, you get about 300 potential home sites remaining. I say about because the reason we do density studies is because there's lots of factors that can be different on any particular property. You know, there can be, you know, rezones that don't show up as a CSM. There can be, you know, situations where rights have been allocated differently, you know, to different landowners due to deed restrictions or other things. There's circumstances where people give rights up for easements, and I haven't counted all of that in there because that's really hard to do on a town-wide level. This is why we do, you know, charge $120 for a density study on a particular property, because there's a lot of research that goes into getting the right answer on a particular piece of property. And I can't do that very easily across the entire town because it would take, you know, it would take a tremendous amount of time. But a rough estimate, you know, looking at that number, you can say, you know, plus or minus 300 potential splits in those 3 categories. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, this one. So what state law says about comprehensive planning is that the comprehensive plan has to be based on population projections for the community. You have to have sufficient capacity in the plan to create enough homes for what the expectation is based on population projections that of the household need. How many houses are you going to need to build over the next 20 years? Well, when we look at the census, the 2010 census population for the town of Oregon was 3,184. The 2020 census was 3,125. So that is a decrease in population. Why did the population decrease? Could be annexation, could be kids moving away, could be, you know, people dying and maybe, you know, or homes being taken away, things like that, right? But that's what happened between 2010 and 2020 for a variety of reasons. So, you know, the projecting, you know, what's going to happen from there is a little tricky, because the last time the Department of Administration population section that does these projections did these was back in 2013. And so if you look at their projections, you can see that they were already high based on where the 2020 census is. So we know that they were higher than they were. But if we take the increase each year from those 2013 projections and apply it to the 2020 census numbers and look out to 2040, we get a projected population of about 3,323. So 198 more people in the town of Oregon in 2040 than were here during the 2020 census. The average household size in Oregon as of 2020 was about 2.84. So 2.84 people per household. That's the average size of number of people living in each house. So if you take that 198 people and you divide it by 2.84, you come up with roughly 70 houses. So what that's saying is if these projections are correct, that by 2040, you can expect that Oregon will need to build 70 more houses to accommodate the new population. Now, if you only had room for 70 houses, right, that would essentially create a monopoly, right? People could charge whatever they wanted because there's only one home site for people. So there's a market factor. There's an economic market factor that you add on to that, right? And basically what most analysts will tell you is that you need twice as much the capacity in your plan for those homes as what your projected need is. Does that make sense? This is, I hope this isn't getting too complicated. So what that means is if your plan's going to do a reasonable job of accommodating your expected population growth over the next 20 years and provide enough options there that consumers have some choice as to which houses they buy or which houses they buy, you can expect that your plan should have a room for 140 new houses. You're going to need 70, we should have room for 140. Well, when we look at that map that we looked at before, we know we have 65 potential home sites from those traditional subdivision lots that can redivide. And we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 at the 1/35 density standard. So that's 365 potential home sites in the plan. What that tells us is you've got plenty, right? There's not, if you follow the policies that are in that plan as drafted, you're not going to run into a situation where you're going to run out of home sites based on what we think you're going to need. You're going to have more than that. And that's what most towns do, most communities do. Even places like, town of York, which has a 1 for 75 acre standard, their population growth is so low that they have essentially a 700-year supply of home sites, even at that 1 per 75. So what I think the takeaway here is the town doesn't need to feel that it needs to, it shouldn't feel obligated to create a tremendous amount of new development potential in the town beyond what you already have planned for. You can try and do that if you like, but it's not going to change the population dynamics and the demand, right? I mean, it's just going to create, in some cases, if you create a plan that has way more development potential than what population projections would suggest you need, you can create some unrealistic expectations on the part of landowners, right? Because they may say, oh, wow, I'm going to cash in because I'm going to be able to do all this development. But if the market's not there to support, all those houses, you may have some people who end up being frustrated, right? Because they're not meeting what they expected to need. Now, I mean, part of the question, and I hear this a lot from communities is, well, this sort of if we build it, will they come kind of scenario. If we, open up the town and put up a lot of new houses, won't people, come to us? And the thing to remember is that the town of Oregon is essentially competing for new residents with the city of Madison, the village of Oregon, the village of Brooklyn, with all the other towns and communities in the county. And so there's yes, the population of the county is growing, but a lot of that is going into the cities, places like the city of Sun Prairie, the city of Madison, the city of Verona. The overall share of population growth that has historically, landed in the towns has been about 12% of the county's total population growth. And in fact, those numbers in recent years have started to shift even further. So I think recent percentages are even lower. Because I think younger people, and a lot of people who are moving into this area prefer to live in urban environments. And that's become an increasing trend. We've seen, in terms of housing starts, we've seen a much higher proportion of multifamily housing in urban areas than we did 10 or 15 years ago. And so what I think that, again, the takeaway here is that I think the Plan Commission and the town board, when you're looking at the question, how much development, do we need to accommodate in our plan? I don't think you should feel obligated to try and push that. I think with between 1 to 35 and the redevelopment of some of those traditional subdivision areas, plenty of development potential, again, based on those projections. Now, maybe those projections aren't good. I asked DOA, when you're going to rerun them. We got a new census out, they try and do that. They, last time they did it 3 years after the census came out. This year, the census was delayed. There's still a lot of information from the census that DOA uses to make those projections that's still not available. The raw numbers are out there, but the age population numbers we still don't have. And so there may be I would be surprised if we see new projections out of DOA much before 2025. So we're using the ones we got because they're the best we have. Other questions on that before I move on?
Well, I understand you're gonna move on. So tell me if this question should be deferred, but if we've got enough potential building sites already, what can be done if we want to direct people in that direction? For example, we addressed a petition today where a landowner created 3 new lots that are not adjacent to a subdivision. That landowner and the owner of those 3 lots has every expectation that he's going to be able to sell them, I'm sure, and make some money, that's the real estate business. But what can or what do other towns want to do to direct people either to lots like that or direct them into the subdivisions?
So if we can go back to the map we had up there before subdivision. So let me make sure I understand what you're asking, Tim. So if you're saying, what if the town would prefer, let's say, that these lots in red developed before we started doing new splits in FP 35 in the farmland preservation? Is that sort of the question?
That's kind of the gist of what I'm.
Okay, so what could the town do that would sort of steer people towards those lots rather than creating new ones in the farmland?
And the reason behind my question is this recurrent theme: the residents want the township to remain rural in character. So by that, I take to mean fewer.
Well, I mean, one thing you could do, if you think about how the development process works, right? Each of these lots, I mean, if this is a 4-acre lot, it's probably zoned RR4 or, something like that, right? I mean, it's probably zoned based on its current size, right? The town, if you wanted to, you could identify all of these, areas, or at least the ones that you think have the most development potential, and the town could rezone them to a zoning district that would allow for 2-acre lots, say, as a FAR2 or RR2 instead of RR4. What that would do is that would allow people to redivide those just with certified survey map, rather than having to go to a public hearing, get a rezone, go to the town. So that it would certainly be an easier path for those folks to be able to redivide than it would be for people who were going to go through the whole public hearing process and the rezone process. That's certainly within your purview. That's certainly something you could do. You may want to poll some of these landowners to see how they would feel about that.
That's what I was gonna bring up. I mean, that's assuming that these people on these smaller lots want to have another house.
They may not, right, exactly. But that's certainly something, the town could certainly go through a process like that. I mean, compared to what we've done when we did the comprehensive revision, for example, I mean, you're only talking, 49 parcels, right? So it wouldn't be that difficult to, pull them all. Hold a public hearing, and say, this is what we're talking about doing, seeing who, wanted to participate in that and who didn't. I mean, that could be done.
Just on this general concept, Eric, if you don't mind my asking, do you get people calling you and saying, is there a lot available in the town of Oregon that I could build a house on?
All the time.
Okay.
Inventory is super low.
I've heard.
I say inventory is incredibly low. But how many of these red spots are the house sitting in the middle of the 4-acre lot?
Right,
You know, you can't divide that into 2 lots.
right.
That's all.
So any people you get, you
So
kind
I
of
think my
direct them.
question is just how many of the 59 or whatever are actually even doable?
Yeah, and we'd have to do some more work.
That'd be probably a pretty small number because people don't build on the side of their lot. They build kind of in the middle.
Right.
So
So when you get somebody,
might
you
not
gotta
have
kind of
very
direct
many.
them to a large landowner that's, through the wind, whatever, is maybe looking to do some splits.
yeah, I think the biggest thing is your landowners. Well, I mean, you're in a rural community, so farmers, they don't necessarily, want to create home sites, and so, you're really looking at your areas that are, less ag, more wooded, more more appropriate for a home. And if those areas had higher density, one of the problems right now in the real estate is, we've seen prices just, kind of skyrocket. And that's because of inventory. On the development rules are tough enough that there's not a lot to choose from. I mean, we get calls all the time.
Okay, I was just
People
curious.
can't
Thanks.
find it, and when they do find it, it becomes a rich person moving to the country. It's not the young couple that would love to live in the country because they were brought up in the country. They almost, it's out of the question, So that's the tough part.
I mean, if you think about how development occurs in most of Dane County, I mean, what Eric's saying makes a lot of sense, right? Because what we typically do is we don't create a whole bunch of lots and zone them and then wait for people to buy them. We do them one at a time, right? So, someone wants to build a lot, we go through the rezone and see if it meets the town plan, and that's fine. But I think, what it takes a certain level of sophistication and a certain level of stick-to-itiveness to be able to go through that process, right? So, a couple who wants to buy a home probably may or not have the wherewithal for either financial or patience to go through the rezone process and land division in order to create, a lot for them. And it's probably going to be more expensive for them to do that. So, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. We can certainly do some more work on this and, do some more detailed mapping and try and see, how many of these things, could potentially be redivided. We can look at that. The other thing, Tim, is what other communities do is they identify areas maybe adjacent, to the subdivisions or, in areas where the town feels development would be appropriate at a higher density and put them in a different density category. Right, so, maybe you're creating new traditional subdivision areas, right, in the town, that were perhaps close to these rather than, I mean, these are really based on existing, subdivision areas, with a little bit of spillover on the sides, right? But, the town could also say, some of these areas, I don't want to point to anyone in particular's property, but some of these things near some of these other areas, maybe that's where we could entertain the idea of new subdivision plats that would, create compact development, well-designed, adjacent to, other nearby subdivisions.
So how do we designate that? Wouldn't we have to,
You change the color on the map.
we would pick some lucky landowner and say, yours is the one.
Well, that's the trick, right? I mean, so yes, if you do that, then you're looking at, and you're creating windfall for somebody. Now, you can, if you wanted to try and share that wealth a little bit, I mean, that's part of what TDR is designed to do. So what you could do is you could designate an area and say, this is, potential subdivision, but it's only as a TDR receiving area. Right now, that's going to increase some costs a little bit, but at the same time, it also means that that landowner doesn't get the full benefit of that because he's got to buy development rights somewhere else in order to do that. And what that has a tendency to do is sort of spread that windfall out a little bit to, more than just like one or two landowners. So that's certainly something the town could consider. What if the question is, does the town have enough development potential to accommodate the projected population? The answer is yes, and then some. But to get to Eric's point, the second question is even with that, is the process by which people can create new homes, is that sufficiently difficult that we're turning away some of the people that we want to live in the town? That's another question.
What if we did nothing?
Well, that's sort of what this is, right? I mean, right now, you've got your rural preservation 2, and that's 1 per 35. This is farmland preservation, that's 1 per 35. All of these areas are currently in traditional subdivision, which is 1 per 2. The transition areas, they're pretty much, 1 per 35 because the village is expecting to be able to grow there, and they don't want to have to deal with a large amount of unsewered subdivision lots if they're going to be trying to annex them and provide sewer and water to them, right? Because that's going to be very difficult for them to do. So, I mean, that's really what this map is basically the status quo. It's what your current town plan is. It's tweaked a bit. And, we talked about in Plan Commission about trying to remove some things from farmland preservation to rural mixed use in order to deal with the state requirements that 80% of farmland preservation areas have to be zoned for farmland preservation. And so that's what this map does. It does a lot of that. But these areas here, that we've highlighted in red, they're there now. I mean, that's not new. We're not proposing anything dramatically different. And that's fine. I mean, you can do that. That's, in terms of you've met the statutory standard for the plan. You've accommodated the projected population growth, as I said, and then some. We still have TDR in the plan, but we're not looking at it as a major way of moving development around as much as sort of a one-to-one convenience for landowners, and trying to get where there's opportunities to move houses from productive farm soils to less productive soils. There's an opportunity to do that. And then we're clarifying the Lyman-Anderson rule, right? So that one landowner can move home sites around, multiple different farms. And again, trying to get it off the best farmland and move it into, to areas that's more suitable. So I guess, what part of the message is, if you want to do more than that, you can, but you don't have to. This is a perfectly acceptable way to approach the town comprehensive plan.
This is describing 365 potential lots.
Yeah.
We do not have the 140 lots available. We just have the potential.
But they can apply for a rezone and a land division and create a lot. And the plan allows that to happen.
So we have the potential. We do not have the specific lots there.
They're not there yet, but there's a process in the plan to allow that to happen, which is basically what you've been doing since 1995. So, if people are willing to go through the rezone and land division process, the policies in the plan are such that sufficient lots can be created to meet the expected demand of 70 new home sites by 2040.
If we have a number of people who are very interested in having an increase and the number of lots to create new numbers, to be raising our tax levy as to what it is, because right now state
But
law.
it's a market-driven system. And if the demand isn't there, population of the town of Oregon is not going to grow sufficiently to support the number of home sites, then you're not going to realize that tax revenue anyway.
We're hearing there is a demand. People are calling the Realtor all the time asking about sites.
Right.
And that the sites aren't there.
Well, the sites aren't there yet because they haven't gone through the rezone and land division process. I guess, you know, if the town wanted to create a new subdivision area, right, you could do that. And you could probably, you know, but who's going to determine, who's going to pick which properties are going to be the beneficiaries of that? You could do that. I mean, as I said, you could certainly designate a new, but, you know, I don't know any situation where the actual process of dividing and building the land is done by a public entity. Except for, you know, like public housing projects, that's going to be, someone in the market is going to do that. Now you can designate an area in the plan and say, hey, we really want a new subdivision here, right, at this spot, and we're going to have, you know, 1 to 2 acres, and we're going to make it as easy as possible by rezoning it ahead of time. You're still going to need a developer who's going to come in and do the land division and the site preparation and the, you know, the construction. So regardless of whether you go through the rezone process first, or you're just going through the land division and construction process, the plan sets the parameters, but the actual creation of those lots is going to be the private sector. It's a market-based system.
Right, it does come back to us though, in every single case, just to be general about a prior example that faced this township not too long ago. A private individual came forward with a parcel of land that she owns and had proposed a plan for a conservation subdivision, first of its kind in our township.
Right.
Had a lot of things going for it. Her land happened to be next to an existing subdivision. And for reasons that we heard expressed today, not in my backyard, that interferes with my enjoyment of my subdivision.
I hear you.
I would like to find a system that avoids all that kind of controversy and conflict, but is there such a thing?
I don't think such a system exists. You know, I mean, I understand the dilemma. I mean, that's why I think most towns, you know, don't do a lot of very dramatic changes in their town land use plans because of exactly that issue. People have lived with 1 per 35, you know, since 1995, and people feel it's fair. They know what they got into when they bought land here, right? You know, I mean, they knew that there might be some houses cropping up here and there, but that they weren't going to get, you know, a whole, you know, large amount of dense development right on their doorstep. So that's what they expected when they bought the land. And you know, look at when you do these, you know, these rezones, and you know, Jennifer had some numbers of it, about like 5 or 6 a year or something like that.
That's what our average has been for new homes.
That sounds about right. I mean, that just, you know, from what I know from having worked on, you know, things in the town of Oregon, you get about 5 of them a year.
Yeah.
But those aren't normally very controversial, right? Because you know, there's 1 or 2 here, and as I said, it's what people understood would happen. You know, when they bought the property. Now, I mean, you're right. If you wanted to do something very different with that, you're probably going to get people who are going to be unhappy about it. And you know, not to say that shouldn't be done in those circumstances, but you know, you want to really have very good justification for why that particular site and not another site. You know, and what kinds of criteria you're going to put on that to minimize those impacts. It's a much taller order of business.
Yeah. From my standpoint, I was one of those people looking for a lot in the town of Oregon or wherever for a long, long time. I think not so much the town doing it, but us educating the town to say, listen, if you want to sell your lot, this is what you can do. And these are the potential steps you can take because you can make some money doing it, as opposed to, Eric looking for a lot that's on MLS system that he's not gonna find. You can approach a farmer, or you can talk to a farmer, or a farmer can look at all this and say, hey, I want a couple TDRs sold. I think that may be another angle to take if you want to do this. It's not so much the town advertising, but the property owners have to be aware of what they can and can't do. And I think, like Eric also mentioned, a lot of these property owners don't want to sell. They want their 15 acres. They want their 30 acres. They don't want anybody else there.
The other thing I can tell you is you're going through a comprehensive revision of the entire plan right now. And, we're trying to do a lot to reformat it. We're trying to do a lot to make it more understandable. We're trying to clarify some longstanding policies, the Lyman-Anderson rule, those kinds of things. One thought I would have for you is it may be worth getting, that the status quo plan with these tweaks done. And then maybe have another discussion about, hey, what if we wanted to redirect development instead of having 1 for 35 over, large portions of the town? What if we really wanted to focus it on, a couple of areas with, and I think you could do that as an amendment to the plan. Once you get the, the sort of basic plan updated, you can do that at any time. There's nothing that would prevent you from, taking another look at that in, say, a year or 2 years after you get, the basic adopted. And, maybe you find, with just the tweaks that, the process is more understandable. Maybe it's easier for people to navigate that. So you start to see more people being able to get through that process and create those lots. And maybe you don't. On the other hand, maybe you say, yeah, we're not happy with the scattered nature of this development. We really want to try and focus it in. Let's have a discussion about how we just do that. And maybe you do that after a year or two of experience with the cleaned up, modernized basic plan.
One of the objectives that you have put into the revised draft, and this could have been in the original one, but I particularly noted that you wrote an objective would be to limit non-farm development according to density and siting criteria described in this plan. Now, we've been talking about the density criteria, but are there siting criteria in our plan?
Yes, there are. I mean, there's a particularly related to soils, to staying away from the center of farm fields, and trying to keep development in areas like woodlands on poorer soils, away from primary productive soils. There's a lot of that was very good from the current plan. A lot of that language is carried over into the draft. So yes, there is. There's quite a bit of attention focused to where should that development go.
It has to do with soil, but let's take a recent example of anybody's in our memory, because it happened here today. Was there anything in our siting criteria that would affect the proposal that Mr. and Mrs. Grover presented? 3 lots side by side along the street. Did any of our siting criteria address those?
I mean, I have to look at it again, but I think my recollection is it talks about the idea of trying to build near existing development, to cluster development where possible together. So I think, from what my recollection of that language is, that Grover petition was pretty consistent with a lot of the kinds of citing language that you currently have.
You think that we have enough specifics for citing to make decisions that could exclude some buildings?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
You have on the slide that's up there, all those little green fingers that are sliding through the plan. We note the wildlife preserve in the lower left-hand corner as being a rather large wetland. But there's a lot of little skinny fingers and splotches here that are a little surprising. And they run through some of the
They do indeed.
Through the lot. Now, I'll just pick on one that's in the.
You're talking about resource protection corridors.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those are defined, if I'm remembering right, as being wet, severe slopes. What else?
Wetlands, floodplains, slopes exceeding 12%. And I think that's it. So, intermittent and 75-foot buffers next to navigable waterways.
Okay.
So what you see here, a lot of these little narrow areas here, those are slopes. Those are areas of slopes that exceed 12%. Now they're small, and typically, when we see these in a rezone application, right? Especially in things like that, they're small enough areas that they don't really prevent development. But some careful that you want to be a little more careful about how you draw the lot lines. So you don't put a lot that's in nothing but resource protection corridor, because then that's problematic for construction. And when we see those kinds of things, we'll comment on them in zoning petitions. Now, some of these other areas are pothole lakes, and you can see the round sort of, so they're small ponds, glacial ponds. And because they're lakes or ponds under county shoreline zoning, there's a 75-foot setback associated with them. So in some cases, that may be what you're seeing here. You may also see floodplains under the flood insurance rate maps. And so, when you look over here, you've got a large sort of network of stream corridors, floodplains, and wetland, kinds of areas that, are largely prohibited from development under county shoreline wetland zoning regulations and floodplain. So, that's a lot of what's happening here. And then you can see some of the slope areas here, which are associated with the terminal moraine of the glacial ice sheet. So there's specific policies related to resource protection corridors in the draft plan. Basically, you're trying to discourage structural development from there. And there's also descriptions, though, that if you've got field information that differs from what we have mapped, there's a process to reconcile that. So if someone gets a floodplain determination or flood elevation study, or gets a wetland delineation, and the field data shows a different arrangement of those features than what we show on these maps, we can adjust that, and we can work with that. Basically, the reason you want this in your land use plan map, though, is to give people a heads up as early as possible, right? So what you don't want to do is you don't want to create a lot, get it rezoned, or have someone pay money for it, and then they find out the whole thing's wetland and they can't build it. Right? That's the worst possible scenario. That's when people go ballistic and we get the screaming matches on the town board floor, right? Or the county board floor. No, what you want to do is you want to give people access to a map like this and say, look, you're thinking of building a lot right here. You might want to think about that a little bit, right? Because there's something there. There's a wetland, there's a floodplain. May not be the best place to put a house and a septic system. And so, the earlier people can get that information in front of them, the better everyone else off. Everyone is, and so you have these policies already in your plan, but you just haven't mapped them. And so part of what we want to try and do is to make sure that people are aware where those policies apply, so that they have that understanding.
We can't think of a way to map where we want development, where we do want development to take place without picking certain landowners who are given favored status.
Right. Well, that's why most towns, talk about criteria, they talk about, policies, and then if someone brings an application to them, they run it against those policies and say, yeah, it meets these criteria. We think we can approve it, right? For exactly that reason, because it's very hard to pick those winners and losers, on on a particular map. Until you have a specific proposal to react to.
And when we react, though, I would like to be able to refer to something on a plan that helps me decide, is this something we want to approve,
Yeah.
or is this something we can disapprove?
Right.
So I'd like to see citing, for example, really.
Okay.
more.
I mean, take a look at what, you know, take a look at the draft, and if there are certain things that you think need to be strengthened, and let me know, and we can certainly, make those changes. And if that's something, if we want to have a plan commission meeting specifically on citing and talking about that, we can go over those policies in detail, and happy to take edits or suggestions.
Because you're not due for another vacation for a while yet, right?
For a little bit.
Well, let's just, we're going to be having a joint plan commission and town board meeting early September.
Okay.
So between the two scheduled meetings that we have, and this is going to be one of the discussions. Or one of the, to be finding out how to go through this process. And if you're placing against this, while there is the development rights, the transfer of those development rights is a concept, and we're trying to get, we don't have that policy yet. And if we do have it, then we're looking to other towns that also do have it.
Mhm.
And we're hearing back that they say, nobody's doing it.
Yeah, we had this discussion before. I mean, if you think about the fact that there are, potentially more than twice as many potential home sites in the plan available under your current plan, then population projections would suggest you need. That means there's people have, if they're willing to go through the process, they have a lot of sites to choose from in the town of Oregon, of places that they could put a home. If you add a layer onto that of TDR, why would someone participate in that, in the TDR program, if they can go down the road and create a home site without doing TDR?
Mhm.
So, if you really wanted TDR to be your focus, you would probably have to limit all those other options, so that TDR is your only option, or one of your very few options for getting a home site.
All the little red
Yeah.
outline lots there represents roughly 65 potential new
That's
lots.
Give or
That's
take, given,
give or take. Just use your number there.
Sure.
That's it. And there's going to be a factor of saying, I ain't gonna cut up I love my little thing.
Yeah.
So even that is going to be a stretch. It's a potential.
Yeah.
But it's not an active market. Then you have two, the TDR. The only ones who have an active market are the farmers who have a development right and say, I'm gonna lop off a couple of acres here and there in the woods along the road, or whatever their,
right.
whatever the thing is. And even there, they're not too eager to do that. They're not.
There are, in every TDR program that I've seen, there are more people willing to sell their rights than there are people willing to buy.
Okay.
There's lots of farmers who would love to get money for not developing their land.
Okay.
I mean, that's the best of both worlds, right?
That is, but where do we find that information?
Well, but my point is that so there's a lot of people out there going, I'd love to sell my rights, but they don't have anyone to sell them to because there aren't people buying them. And that gets back to my other point. If you have other opportunities to develop without buying a development right, most people are going to take those other avenues rather than go through the hassle and the expense of buying a development right.
That seems like there's a marketing, as much as an education and marketing thing that needs to be out there to be finding out what it's going to take to motivate buyers and sellers.
I agree. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. But you know, you're adding cost, right? Just by the nature of TDR. If you're in a receiving area, if you want to build in a receiving area, you have to buy something that you don't have to buy if you're just developing 1 per 35. Right?
But if you have a 30-acre lot.
Mhm.
And you already have a house on it. And that somebody wants to cut off 1, 2, 3 parcels. The only way they can do it is by a TDR.
Sure.
And so right now they can do all the surveying they want. And sketch out, these would be the ideal lots, but they can't sell them. They can't create them.
I
Until they get a TDR in there.
I mean, I think the experience of most communities has been that TDR is useful for where you have situations where you've got a couple landowners who want to work something out. And you've got one person who doesn't have any splits left. And you've got another landowner who's got really good farmland and they never want to develop. And they get together and they work something out and everybody's happy, right? That's really how it works. What I'm saying is if you want to do more than that with TDR, if you want to say, you know, we want to redirect development off of most of our farmland preservation areas and really push it, you know, next to the subdivisions, you need to make that either a very attractive option, you know, for people to develop that way, or you need to make it basically the only option to develop that way, because otherwise you're not going to get enough participation to drive that kind of major land use change. The convenience thing is good. And I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, with providing that flexibility to a couple of landowners, and especially if you end up with better development at the end of it, and you end up with more contiguous acres, you know, of a particular farm that stays in farming. That's a win-win. I don't see anything wrong with that. But I want to caution, you know, that kind of transaction, which I think is most of what you're seeing, is not the same as saying we want to redirect, you know, large amounts of development from large swaths of town into a particular location. They're different. And I don't know that given the development potential that's in the town, that you're going to be able to do that second thing just with TDR unless you make some really dramatic changes in how people can develop otherwise. Does that make sense?
It would be a crazy idea to adopt the revisions as you've proposed or drafted for us here. And see how things go for a couple of years.
That's what I was suggesting before. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, you're looking at a whole bunch of changes here in this plan, right? I mean, none of them are really significant or dramatic. And if they were, we probably have more people in the audience.
Well, they haven't been told what we're talking about yet.
Yeah.
Be ready.
Oh, yeah.
But we've been talking about, you know, a lot of these ideas in planning commission meetings now for, you know, that's a number of years. So I don't think people are going to get all that worked up about the changes that we have here, but, you know, certainly we want to hear from them. But I think I think that makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of tweaks, there's a lot of fixes here, there's a lot of updates in this plan. And as I said before, you may find with a couple of years of experience with something that maybe the need for dramatic change is different, or you may find it may help focus where you need to make those changes in the future. So I think that's a good approach. I really do.
So our
Brian,
Yes.
this is Jennifer. I just wanted to kind of pipe in here for a minute. The problem we have is our levy limits and that we cannot get anything without net new construction. So right now, that is our major concern. So I have to cut funding to our senior center. I have to look at our garbage collection, and these are all tied to net new construction. So we have to do something. And what else are our options?
Well, you could go to referendum. I mean, if the financial issue is the issue, I mean, maybe it's better to address the financial issue directly. I mean, if you went to a referendum, say on the senior center. I mean, that sounds like something that maybe your residents might support, you know, I mean. You can raise the levy limit if you go to referendum. I know communities don't want to do that, but I think it may be an easier sell to address that directly than to try and back into that by creating lots that the market isn't ready for. That the plan commission would have to pick spots on the map as to who's going to benefit from that windfall. And then you still don't know if that actually gets built, right? I mean, you could try and, you know, pick those things, but you're still going to have to be dependent on a private developer to actually build those lots so that you can raise the levy limit and do that construction. And you don't know if that's going to happen. So that's sort of a gamble.
Yeah, it's not really us raising the levy, it's the Department of Revenue. It's their formula, unfortunately.
No, I get it. I totally get it, Jennifer. And it's not a great formula. And I understand that, particularly for small communities. But my point is, you could, you know, the plan commission could say, we're going to pick this property and we're going to zone it for subdivision development. And, you know, a year could go by and a developer might not have done it, and you won't be able to raise the levy because you won't have the construction on the ground. That's my point.
Well, what if we do next to, you know, we've got the red dotted line. If we don't do anything, that red dotted line keeps getting further and further, and the village is going to continue to put our land in extraterritorial jurisdiction. So wouldn't it make sense to try and go near that area that they haven't claimed? Otherwise, we'll continue to lose land through annexation.
That's one approach. I mean, you could also work on an intergovernmental agreement with the village and get a better understanding of where their long-term boundaries are going to be. And then help identify areas that could be developed under the town. That's what the town of Verona recently did with the city of Verona. And help designate some area. Now, they did do that thing of, we're going to pick this area and allow more development on the map here. I mean, they took that step. And it was controversial. You know, they had to deal with that, but I mean, that's certainly an approach that you could take. When I say it's a risk though, is that, I mean, right now, you know, if someone wanted to, they could create over 300 lots in the town of Oregon, but they haven't done it yet. And why not? And so my point is that even if you designated an area and said, we're going to have all these lots here, it's not a guarantee that those lots will actually show up.
We've had people though come and ask us for areas, and I don't think we know what to do. So it would kind of be an idea of, you know, how we could get that to work. And we've tried intergovernmental agreements with the Village of Oregon. They have not been receptive. That's not to say that with new boards, it wouldn't change, but we've tried that. So, but we would love your help in that area too, if you could help us, or somebody else could help us with that.
Yeah, I may not be the best person for that. I'd be happy to comment on one, but you might want someone who's probably has more negotiating skills or legal skills than I do.
Well, let's look at one of the barriers that we have to development right now. Is the only avenue to development is who owns the development rights is basically the ones that have the option to be developing something. We got 4 lots. So far, just this meeting, we have 6 lots that have come before us. Now, if we have and we've speculating that our little colored squares there, that they will be willing. I'm not so sure they are. And we do not have TDR in place.
Right. TDR is proposed in this plan.
TDR is proposed in the plan, and the sooner we get that proposed and marketed, the sooner I think we're going to be seeing some action on that. Or we'll get some answers. Or we'll get some answers as to whether there's a market or not. But right now, it's a zero market the way we have it.
Well, it's not zero. As you said, you just approved, you're looking at approving 6 lots,
Well,
which is more than your average per
but
year.
that right there is all based on the development rights.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so that's all, so I'm just looking at that, it is only the development rights and it's also on farmland. And so it hasn't left that farmland to go someplace
That's
else.
correct.
And we do not have that available
You don't have that
to
mechanism.
anybody yet.
Right.
So that's, and that's where we have the 300, about 300 potential lots created that way. And something that we could be having people come forward and say, I want to do this on my property. Instead of picking who will be your neighbor's property, but not you.
And Chuck has already suggested that there's, the town could participate in an education process.
Yes.
About how this might be beneficial to the town as well as people wanting to live here. Eric, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I didn't know it's public to talk, but
Yeah, I'll recognize you.
with what Brian's saying, there's a lot of people that aren't that familiar with TDR. I've done 3 of them. Not in Oregon. Most of your good pieces that are buildable. You might have, you know, especially when you start getting into your 5 acres and bigger, where the house is not sitting in the middle of it. You know, you probably have some of those people out there that have 30 acres, Hobby Horse Road, you know, there's a bunch of them right there. I was just looking at my map and pulling up. You know, which ones are wooded, which ones are really could. If those people were okay with, you know, splitting their property. Well, if they understood what TDRs were, and because like Brian said, there are people that will sell TDRs. You know, I can get on the phone tomorrow and buy TDRs. Normally it's the receiving property. And the receiving property typically is the tough part because the town and the county have to listen to the feedback of the neighbors that are going to be there to say, wait a minute, we bought next to this 30 acres and we didn't really ever expect them to be able to split it into 3 more houses. So you have to be able to deal with that. So if you had some good guidelines that your community here would realize that these are the guidelines. And as long as people can fall within the guidelines, you know, the site stuff that you're talking about, then some of those will become available for TDR. TDR is just a little bit more complicated when it taking it through the whole step of the CSM process, because you have the, you know, you have the meeting with you folks to decide if it's a good sending and a good receiving. And the county plays into that based on your land use plan. And but I do think that, you know, you have a lot of ag preservation, a lot of ag land, and those people are probably not interested in creating home sites, the majority of them. Even if it was easy. They don't really care to do it. And that's the farmers for the most part. Now, if it was really easy and they had a wood lot, they might do it and put the money in another safe investment. But they're typically people that it's my farm and I'm not really interested in using my 9 development rights, you know, and Rutland has the same thing. But there is plenty of spots in Oregon that if you did have TDR in place and you had some good guidelines, there's people out there that would probably, there might even be people going to those people and saying, hey, you know, I'll buy your 5 acres for this place because it has no development rights, but understand I'm going to buy a development right over here and I'm going to add it to it. There's going to be a home there. You know, I mean, full disclosure. I did one last year and what it was is, I'll give you an example. I had 30 acres over by the racetrack. Okay, but it was 30 acres of woods. And there's already homes there, all 5 acre lots all around it. And it's really close to the racetrack. And I had a seller that bought a piece of land and it had 2 development rights. And he said to me, what am I going to do with these? it really doesn't, you really can put 2 development rates on it because it has a big pond and I said to him, I said, you know, if the township would allow, I would buy one of your development rights and put it on my 31 acres. Full disclosure, went to the town with him and that, you know, the town opened it up for public hearing with the neighbors. We had one neighbor come to it and, you know, he was concerned. I said to him, I said, well, I do have 30 acres. I could put my house right here because it was already rezoned. I could build on 30 acres. But all I did was I said to him, I said, we're going to keep the house far enough away from you. And there's a big area of woods. It's really not going to be intrusive to you if you think about it. And he was okay with it when it was all done. So it became a win-win. The seller sold his TDR. I bought it. I made another 5-acre lot, which made my property worth more money. So it was worth the hassle to do it. And I knew there was buyers for it. So that's kind of what you're going to need in order to generate, you know, these kind of home sites. If you pick one, that becomes really difficult unless you picked sending area that you really felt was perfect. And that'll take a lot of research on your part. Which ones are the really perfect where we're not going to have a lot of community fighting us. And if you could find those, then you could label them as a TDR sending spot. And then people would have to buy a development right somewhere and create one. You know, that it'd be a combination. You'd maybe speed it up for some of those people.
Sending areas are, you know, as Eric said, are easy also because if you put a conservation easement on a property, you're keeping it the way it is. And neighbors aren't going to complain about that, right? I mean, the neighbors are going to complain when you change the use of the property, not when you keep it the way it is. Eric's point about, you know, identifying sending areas in advance, that's certainly an option. Town of Cross Plains, for example, has identified and pre-zoned areas as TDR sending areas associated with some of the environmental features that they want to protect, such as like Ice Age Trail and the Black Earth Creek sorts of areas where they mapped out areas and said, yes, these are areas we want to preserve, and we're going to take the extra step of putting them in the TDRS zoning district so people know where they can look for development rights.
Jennifer, are you still with us? We look up towards heaven when we talk. To Maybe she doesn't know she.
Yeah,
She's still on.
Any further comments you'd like to make or contribute to this part of the discussion?
no, that's it. I just worried about how we pay our bills. So, and that's a discussion that's takes at a higher level than us, but unfortunately, we're stuck in the middle and we're very much in a pickle because of our size and the levy limit constraints we're under. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
If you've got a couple minutes yet, I just wanted to talk real quickly about a couple of special land uses that we're talking about in the plan. Renewable energy facilities, particularly solar farms, are becoming a hot issue in Dane County. The Public Service Commission just approved a very large one down in the town of Christiana. We think it's important that towns start to develop some policies about these new land uses that we're going to be seeing more of. So there are 3 different scales of solar energy facilities in our zoning ordinance and in other tools. The first are you know, small, like rooftop solar, where it's basically intended for you know, it's intended for use on the premises, and maybe they sell a little bit of excess energy to, you know, to the utility, but primarily it's either serving, you know, one farm or one house, and you know, it's all sort of rooftop, self-contained within the property. Under our zoning ordinance, we treat that the same way we treat any other utility service. So whether it's an electrical line or a telephone cable or a septic system, it's a permitted use as long as it's primarily intended to serve that site. So those are, we don't really worry about those. Those are, we just treat them as we would any other utility. There's another category though, where the primary use is offsite. So the primary purpose is to be selling that energy to, you know, utility or selling it to somebody else. And if they're under 100 megawatts, they're gonna fall under county zoning. Yes,
How big of an area does it take to make 100 megawatts?
it varies.
Let's just take you at
Yeah.
a flat piece of land, average piece of land. It's there, it's here in Wisconsin. Roughly,
I don't know the answer. So
Well, that would-
I'll
that would be-
I'll try to find out.
that'd be very helpful because we're personally getting pressure or interest on wind and solar on some of our land.
Okay, I will,
And hearing that other people around here and
Yep.
where there's a substation, which there's one across from you. Yeah, and there's
I noticed
also,
it, yeah.
there's one down on M.
Mhm.
Do we have any other substation in the town? Those are two that come to mind. And we may be sharing that one with Rutland, but the folks are hovering in a certain radius around those substations.
that,
And it'd be very helpful to know, and it seems like there's some recent legislation that is encouraging such development with all kinds of tax credits and
yeah, Congress. does.
financing possibilities. That if we're gonna be planning something, it would be very nice to know that. So
That's a good point. Let me
how
submit-
many megawatts per acre?
Yeah, I mean, recognize that may be a number that changes over time. Because as solar panels get more efficient, you may need less acreage to,
It's something that's today.
but I will, I'll look into that. and try and get you an answer.
That'd be very helpful to us.
You mean kilowatts, right?
Megawatts.
What are megawatts? Sorry, my husband does solar and I'm asking him, but he's not familiar with megawatts.
A megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts. I believe.
A kilowatt is 1,000 watts.
Kilowatt is 1,000 watts. So most household installations, if you're just on site, are probably in the kilowatt range. But if you're starting to generate energy that you're going to be selling to the utility, that's when you get into megawatts.
A quick Google says a conservative estimate for the footprint of solar development is 10 acres produce 1 megawatt.
10 acres per 1 megawatt. So good.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
It's good to have that.
So there you go. That's probably the current estimate. So, but if they're under 100 megawatts, the Public Service Commission is not going to take jurisdiction and they're going to come to us as conditional use permits. And that means that they're going to be approved by town board and the county zoning committee. And we're going to need language in our plans to deal with that. If they're over 100 megawatts, the Public Service Commission will usually issue a certificate of necessity and they will take jurisdiction and preempt local zoning entirely. But if you read the PSC's ruling on the Koshkonong plant, they referenced the county comprehensive plan and the town of Christiana comprehensive plan in their ruling. And part of what they said is the plan doesn't say anything about it, so it must be fine, basically. So there's some influence there. It's not, it's indirect and it's not guaranteed that the PSC will honor what's in a local comprehensive plan. They don't have to, but they do have to pay attention to it, and they at least have to acknowledge that it's there.
Okay. If just using what you found there, that 100 megawatts represents 100 acres of disturbance.
Fair enough.
So that's just so we have an idea.
Sounds about right.
Okay, so you've got. Well, anyway, so
Yep.
wherever they.
And
wherever
it
they
can be
are-
less than that, right? I mean, it might be, 35 or 40 megawatts or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it could be a small one, but if that's the upper ceiling.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb, I think.
When you're talking about renewable energy, does that include windmills?
It does, yes. Now, a lot of what I'm going to talk about are, windmills have their own issues. We're not seeing as much demand for wind energy because we have terrain. I mean, and so our winds are unpredictable. From what I understand from the renewable energy consultants, Wisconsin's not ideal wind. I mean, there's a few of them around and, but in terms of large scale generation, we're not the best place for that. Solar is fine. We can do a lot of solar. But we're not going to see a lot of utility scale wind because we just don't have predictable winds in this area. If you move out, go out to Kansas, Southern Illinois, places like that where it's flat and you get a pretty steady wind, 200 days a year, that's where you're going to see a lot more of the wind turbines. In this area, we're just not prime for that scale. Certainly but these policies would cover some of those as well.
Don't you also have some issues of the more urbanized an area is, the more objection there generally is to, or that there's more avoidance in the standards of populated areas?
Yeah, that's true. And so, talking to Kathy Kuntz, who's the head of our Office of Energy and Climate Change, what she's hearing from the solar folks is based on the sort of things that went on with Koshkonong and the difficulties that they had getting that approved, that a lot of the energy things are going to be focusing on the smaller facilities in Dane County.
So the 30, 40 acre type.
That's correct. Yeah. So which tells me we're going to be seeing a lot of CUPs. And so we're going to be seeing things coming through town and county zoning decisions for the siting of those 35 to 40 megawatt, 35 to 40 acre types of facilities. Next slide, please. So this is some language. We are currently working on revising the Dane County Farmland Preservation Plan because it's needs to be recertified at the end of this year. And this is some language that we've put together for that effort. We've been told by DATCAP and by our own zoning committee that we need to include some policies for particularly solar arrays because they have the largest impact on farming because they take up acreage. And so some of the things we're looking at the county level, and I would recommend including similar language in the town comprehensive plan, is trying to locate these things near existing substations or transmission facilities. So you don't have to run new transmission lines where possible. Trying to, where practical, manage the density and size so you don't overwhelm a community that's and completely change the rural character. Dealing with visual impact. The hot topic in these things is this idea of multiple or dual use facilities. And particularly in farmland preservation areas, we want to try and design these so that you can have some sort of agricultural activity occurring in between the solar panels. Now, it's probably not going to be row cropping or dairy farms, but things like beekeeping, floriculture, conservation practices. There may be opportunities to do that small scale kinds of agriculture in and around the solar panels. What DATCAP tells us is that they do not consider the solar panels an agricultural use for tax credit purposes. It can be in farmland preservation zoning, but if you're going to claim the credit, you have to show it's predominantly an agricultural use, and they're going to be looking at some of those other ag uses. So we want to try and design these in such a way where we can, that we can promote those kinds of dual uses. Arrange the panels in such a way that you can get equipment through them is another thing we're trying to encourage. Making sure that they comply with erosion control and stormwater plans during construction, operational maintenance, and decommissioning. Where we've got existing mineral extraction sites or other rural industrial sites, those are perfect places to locate these things with minimal impact, and a lot of the berming and vegetative screening is already there, so we want to include that. Try to avoid productive farm soils to the extent possible. Make sure if you've got landscaping around them that they're well maintained and don't become a source for invasive species. And then this last piece is talking about decommissioning them. When we do cell towers, we have a financial instrument in place when we approve them that says if this is ever decommissioned, we want to have a financial insurance that the equipment's dismantled and it's restored to agricultural use. So we want to make sure that, if these facilities ever go offline, that there's a process there to restore it to good farmland use. Underground cables, for example, can really wreak havoc with a plow. So you want to make sure that those are, if these things are taken down, that there's a plan to remove all of that and that it's restored to agricultural and natural resources.
Is that a requirement that it be ag use? What if somebody wanted to develop it into a subdivision or a?
Well, that's a good point. This is the Fayette County Farmland Preservation Plan. So we're focusing specifically on farmland preservation areas. In the town comprehensive plan, I would say it should be restored to use that's appropriate to whatever planning area that facility is in. Now, you're probably not going to see them in the traditional subdivision areas, would be my guess. So there's just not, first off, there's not enough room and no one's going to want to deal with that amount of neighbors coming, talking to them about that, I think. So they're going to probably, and they need areas. So they're going to be in Oregon, they're going to be in rural mixed use or in farmland preservation. So next slide, please. Is there any questions on that, on the solar stuff? And I'll put some policies together specifically for Oregon that have some of those nuances. Do we still want to get into commercial development here? This was another thing that we talked about, so leave it to your discretion.
I'll ask the members of the commission, if you want to continue the discussion here about commercial, or if we had enough for tonight.
Next.
Early first. By commercial,
Meeting plan, I don't mind.
I think the idea was, we're talking about whether we're going to direct development of commercial activities or identify commercial areas on the map. If we're going to just continue to.
It's 4 pages, let's do it. We get. Like to move this along.
All right, let's deal with it.
So some things, some general policies for commercial development anywhere it would occur in the town. This plan is written on the assumption that you're going to review commercial development on a case-by-case basis, as you do with other land use change applications like residential or things like that, and that that the map does not designate specific commercial areas on the plan map. Now, if we go in a different direction, we may have to rewrite some of these policies, but that's the assumption that I wrote these. So there's a general set of standards here. And a lot of these are fairly common sense, but these are the kinds of things where you can start to look at, Tim, to get to your point, can we approve it or can't we, right? Does it meet all of these criteria? So can it result in environmental degradation, inappropriate traffic volumes, or conflict with neighboring uses? The town may set additional limits on the number of employees, hours of operation, number or size of buildings, types or products of services, or outdoor activities as needed to meet the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. Limit rezoning or conditional use permit boundaries to only that portion of land which is necessary for the proposed use. We see this a lot with, we did this recently, I think maybe it was in Oregon, where we had a batch processing plant and a mineral extraction site. And the person came in with a CUP and they did the whole parcel. And the neighbors went nuts, right? Because they're like, it's 50 acres of asphalt plant. It's like, no, actually, it's that tiny little dot right in the middle of the mineral extraction site. So, this is something that we're working at zoning to try and do, is to try and get applicants to more accurately describe what their actual area for a conditional use permit activity, instead of just jumping out of the parcel path. It's a little more work on their part, but it saves a lot of heartache, when you start going to public comment. Let's see, avoid any substantial or expenditure of public funds for services or infrastructure. You don't want commercial that's going to suddenly require you to add multiple lanes onto a town road at the town's expense to handle the traffic. Applicants must request a specific use. What we don't want to see is we don't want to see people saying, hey, I want general commercial zoning for something. And I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I think it'd be, no, you got to specify. You have to tell us exactly what it is you're proposing to do. And you need a site plan. You need to tell us what is that going to look like. These are also requirements of the zoning ordinance. You do need a site plan and specific uses identified. At its discretion, the town may require vegetative screening, noise limits, dust, pollution controls, and or increase setbacks for commercial uses to minimize impacts. These are all within the town plan commission and the town board's purview. Commercial or industrial uses requiring public sewer or water, intensive police or fire protection or other public services typically associated with an urban area will be directed to a designated urban service area. You don't, if you're falling into that category, you probably don't belong on a septic system in a rural town. You need to be in a city. Next slide, please. So that's the sort of umbrella that would apply to any commercial development, but then there's some specifics based on the planning area, right? So in farmland preservation, we're talking about commercial development as needed to support existing agriculture, provide supplemental income for farm families, or provide agriculture related services. Specific zoning districts that would be permitted in farmland preservation would be farmland preservation business, ag transition business, if you're in an ag transition area, limited commercial, which is basically sort of contractor types of operations and is designed to work in a rural area. Or, we have some CUPs for things like limited family businesses, in some of our rural residential and rural mixed use districts. And that's basically it. So I know under your current policy, you do not count commercial development against density policies. I would like to suggest to you that in the farmland preservation area, when you're talking about these kinds of rezones, maybe not for FPV, because that's farmland preservation too, but for some of these others, I'm suggesting that you may want to count that against the rural density policy, because the primary purpose of farmland preservation areas is to protect that area and for continued agricultural use. And if you start seeing a proliferation of limited commercial types of development there, that starts to undermine, I think, that objective. Now, I would recommend rewriting this a little bit, because farmland preservation business is indeed a farmland preservation use. And so maybe you don't count it for that, but you do count it for LC. That would be my recommendation. Questions on that?
So something to talk about.
Okay. Next slide. Rural mixed use area, slightly different policies here. Commercial development's limited to services for local residents. And we're opening up the districts a little bit. Now we're saying ATB, we can't use farmland preservation business in here because this is not a farmland preservation district. It's planning. So ATB, limited commercial or general commercial. And general commercial includes retail, professional services, basically activities taking place indoors, not with very limited outdoor activity. Some limits on size, limited to 2.5 stories or 35 feet, whichever is less, and not more than 10,000 square feet, unless it's a floor area, unless the town plan commission and town board finds in the public interest to allow larger buildings. Arlen had a question about this. He said 10,000 square feet sounds like an awful lot. And it is for certainly your retail types of operations. But if you think about things like a commercial greenhouse or some of the other types of activities that might take place in GC or in ATB, that number starts to jive a little bit. This is what the town of Montrose uses, is 10,000 square feet. Montrose is where Paoli is, for example. So they deal with a lot of sort of small scale retail kinds of things, as well as, some of the larger, area landscaping types of businesses and things like this. Now, remember our earlier policy said the town can reduce that further as needed. So This is sort of an upper limit unless there's extraordinary circumstances. But for any given situation, you can define what the appropriate square footage for that is. And here I'm suggesting that commercial development does not count against the rural density policy, which is what your current plan says for commercial development.
What's your reasoning for that plan?
Because this is a mixed use area, you know, we're basically saying that this is not, it's not gonna be eligible for farmland preservation tax credits. We're not intending necessarily that this remain predominantly in production agriculture, you know, forever, or even for the next 20 years. And because we've got already, just based on the zoning, you know, that is in these areas, we've got a lot of other uses in there. And so there's less conflict.
Where do we have we have these areas now?
I mean, the rural mixed use area is analogous to your rural preservation 2 areas in your current plan, but they've been remapped to include areas that have already been zoned out of farmland preservation zone.
So that's our tan.
Yes, yeah, the tan areas on the map. And this is a policy that this is how your density policy currently works in your current plan, is that the no commercial development counts against 1 per 35 anywhere in the town. Yes.
Let's say some young entrepreneur has a good business idea and he's got some widgets he wants to build. He has a friend in the township that has land in FP 35.
Okay.
That landowner doesn't want to have to give up a split count. Can that landowner take a hunk of his land big enough for this business and rezone it to rural mix or RM something, and then come in and do it so he doesn't have to have a density count against him?
Well, okay, we're talking about 2 different things here. So this is a planning area,
Okay,
right? And you're talking about zoning.
okay,
Now, they should match to some degree, but so if he's in a farmland preservation area now, which is what he have to be if he's an FP 35, right? He would have to get the town board and the town plan commission, and the town board to redesignate that area to rural mixed use first.
okay,
By amending the comprehensive plan.
okay,
So that's how he could do that.
okay.
Simply rezoning it wouldn't work. And then keep in mind that in the farmland preservation area, the state wants us to keep at least 80% of those areas in farmland preservation zoning. So there's a disincentive to rezone large amounts of land out of FP 35. So in the situation you're saying, what he should do is he should come to the town and say, I'd like to amend the land use plan map and put this in rural mixed use. You'd have a public hearing about that and make that decision before you dealt with any zoning issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if he wants to give up a split, then he could just keep it in the.
Assuming it met those other criteria. I mean, it depends what he's doing, right? I mean, if he's just building widgets, then it's probably not appropriate for farmland preservation.
I just know we've had a previous instance where somebody wanted to buy some land in the township and it didn't kind of meet.
Right.
When we talked about, maybe we gotta have designated areas, so I'm trying to stay away from the designated area and have it open enough with some controls that we can.
Sure. Well, go back to the farmland preservation slide for a second, if you would, please. Next one up. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This way.
Down like this.
Yeah, oh, you just skipped it. There we go. Yeah. So, I mean, keep in mind in these areas that are in green on the land use plan map, right? The only commercial development you're going to consider is as needed to support existing agriculture, provide supplemental income for farm families, or provide agriculture related services. If he's just making, you know, I don't know, vases or, you know, batteries or something like that, that's not agriculture related, right? If he's making something, you know, if he's processing, you know, farm produce, or if he's, you know, making, you know, farm equipment or, you know, things like that, that's appropriate. That's what should be done.
Okay, thanks.
If we can scroll down, please. And then one more. And then we've got our traditional subdivision areas. These are residential areas. And I'm suggesting that rezones to commercial districts aren't appropriate for those residential subdivisions. But keep in mind that there are still conditional use permits available for limited family businesses. For example, or home occupations or daycare or things like that, which work fine in those areas. That's why there's a conditional use permit process. So you can deal with any particular issues that may come up. So I'm not going to go through all this. Arlen had a question about the survey. I think I presented this stuff to you before about 3 years ago, but there were some references in the town plan to the survey. That's the survey we're referencing, the one that was done in 2019.
Thank you for pointing it back. Let's go and put it in here in our new. Commission members got it, so
Okay, great.
they have never seen it.
That's all I got.
Well, it was a pleasure. Brian, thank you very much.
This is the first meeting I've been to that you finished your entire presentation.
Is it?
Yeah, very good.
And thank you for answering 2 questions of
Yeah.
the residents.
You bet, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah,
for you.
sure.
When you were talking before about available building sites or land for building in the township, and we're saying basically Oregon doesn't have nothing immediately available. We have to rezone or whatever.
Right, by and large.
What's the average of other municipalities, other rural townships like Oregon? What do they have available?
They do it the same way you do. I mean, they as people want to develop, they entertain the rezone and the land division request. Case by case, and so, I tell people this when, they're coming from out of state or something like this, and I say, they say, hey, where can I find a place to build a house or a place to do this? I always explain to them, I say, look, in Dane County, you're not going to find something ready to go. You have to, find somewhere, you have to understand that there's a process to create the lot and to rezone it. Here are the general rules. It's, 1 per 35, here are the types of siting criteria. If you have questions on a particular property, we can do a density study and find out if there's, but all the communities and all the rural communities in Dane County do that.
Okay, so they don't basically have an inventory. Like,
No, they don't.
like we think we should have, but we don't.
Well, I don't know that you should have or not. I mean, as I said,
Well, no, I agree. It's certain. There are people that think we should have an inventory, so people can just come out here and.
right. I mean, even, let me put it this way, even in like the cities and villages, right? I mean, they're doing the same thing, but on a different scale, and they're attracting developers with large bankrolls that can take some risk, right? So they can build a development, and if all the lots don't sell right away, they're okay. They've got a big enough bankroll that they can weather that storm, right? And if you're talking about 2 or 3 lots here or there, there's not a lot of people who are going to, it's not going to be financially worthwhile to attract developers with the big enough bankrolls to be able to just sort of create lots just on the hope that someone might want to buy them, right? So for rural communities, when you're dealing with, a few lots here and there, which is really what we're talking about, it makes much more sense to just do it as they come, so that you don't have a situation where you have a whole mess of lots that are created that nobody wants to buy.
Right.
When by doing it this way, that someone's interested in it. That there's, usually these happen because someone wants to buy it, right?
Correct.
So the buyer and the seller have already gotten together, and that there's a market for it. So, I think that the city of Madison probably has an inventory of lots, but they don't create them either. Those are all created by, the Veerbickers and, Viridian, some of the large developers that, can play the market dynamics enough that if they have an inventory of lots and they don't sell, they don't lose their shirt.
Well, we have that right here in the village,
Yeah.
but most townships then don't have that.
No,
And so we're not in the minority because we don't have any.
that's correct. You're doing it exactly the same way all the towns and.
So we need to get the homeowner that doesn't want to go to Lennar now in the village and buy a spec home that can only do this. They want more freedom, they gotta come out in the township and buy a lot where they can do what they want, there's no HOA. They can put their driveway kind of where they want, do what they want.
Yeah, and the flip side of that is, I mean, if you're building in the country, you're also responsible for your own sewage, you're responsible for, your own snow
It's
removal.
not for
your-
everybody.
Internet,
What's that?
internet,
Internet?
it's a
Yeah.
huge issue.
Right, so, I mean, like, my personal choice is that I prefer to, pay the city of Madison to take care of some of that stuff for me, so I don't have to worry about it. And yeah, I pay more in taxes to do it. I don't pay for septic inspections and things like that, right? So, I mean, there's a trade-off, and it's a market choice that, that lots of people make. The people who want to live in the country are definitely a subset of, the overall housing market.
So you can't go deer hunting in your yard?
I cannot go deer hunting.
There's a tree on.
Wait, can I go deer hunting in my yard?
Okay, anybody else have more questions for Brian? I think I reflect everyone's appreciation for thanking him.
My pleasure.
for coming in. Yeah,
Thank you.
very good.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
You're not done yet. We'll be speaking with you again.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay, good.
Would that meeting that you were talking about with the town board, is that one that you would want me to attend, or do you want me to just wait till I hear back from you from the?
Do you know the answer to that, Alan?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I would find just the roundabout discussion that we had here on market
Mhm.
and the projected planning, that was very significant and plays into it. And you can certainly sense the frustration that Jennifer Hansen expressed.
Sure.
That's going on and putting the town under stress at the moment.
Right.
Have we set, I think you're down to, what, are we, communication to 13?
I was thinking of jumping ahead to your reports with
Okay.
address Brian's question.
I
Okay,
was going to say, I believe that you guys are gonna just talk about
Yeah,
joint
what-
meeting or whatever at the town board meeting, which would be September 6th. And then if you do decide that you're gonna have a joint one, then it would, I assume you guys would kind of talk out a schedule at that time.
okay, and it could be a work session.
Right,
You could,
It could.
so,
right. It's
Uh,
up to you guys, I guess.
I'll wait to hear from Stephanie.
That's the way to do it. yeah.
So let me know.
Yeah, I think they're gonna rediscuss that and
Okay.
kind of,
with that, looking at a discussion of calendar, with their year.
All right, thank you all.
If we have Tuesdays being our typical time for getting together. The 6th is going to be the board meeting.
Yeah.
We are scheduled to be meeting on the 20th. That leaves the 13th. The typical Tuesday for, if we're gonna do our work session. Are there thoughts? If you're having a work session to be dealing with the issue of how do we do a combination of dealing with development needs, our levy limits, our demand, or do we have a demand from the town to not grow, or if we grow, how much? So I believe those are going to be important points of discussion. Well, that was met with thunderous questions.
Well,
If this is a tricky thing. Because we are talking about desire to increase our tax levy, counter what we're losing to the villages. Possible tax referendum. Dealing with very rapid or payment increases from fire, senior center. Those are the two primary ones that are jumping forward. The torque is also there.
Let me say this, Arlen. The plan commission doesn't deal with a lot of those things.
They don't, but
You could ask our opinion, but it's outside of our jurisdiction to discuss those things. That's a board matter. And if you are gonna take up all those things during a joint meeting, it may be over our heads or above our pay grade.
well, could be. I'm not so sure it is. They're very interrelated. Because if we are just going to go out and say Hillcrest Lane is now development district. We could say that.
Well, we can say that if that's the direction we want to go,
Bingo.
but it's not gonna fix the problem, because what happens on Hillcrest Lane, if you open up for development, is going to take a period of time to happen. So it's not gonna fix our financial situation overnight. So the financial situation is kind of out of our control, because we can only create areas to be built on, and then you have to have the builder, you have to have the buyer first, then you have to have the builder, and you may be talking 2 or 3 years down the road before all of this can happen. So I don't feel that I'm in a position here to say, well, I want a referendum for increasing taxes, or I want budgets cut here or there, because I feel I have all I can do to take care of the plan commission stuff.
I guess I'm not like, you're not going to be, the board has responsibility to do referendum, to borrow money, to be trying to deal with the tax levy and negotiate with the other demands. But if the board is saying the only way we can deal with this is to push development, plan commission, push development.
If that's what the board says, yeah.
Okay, so now, I'm looking for an agenda for that work session. And I'm not so sure we have it. Carl, do you?
No, do you mean the joint meeting? Or joint work session?
The position was to have a joint meeting.
One of the original ideas was to have Jennifer redo her presentation about the tax levy and its impact on the town in general, and how net new construction would have an impact on the tax levy and any kind of increase. So I don't remember how long her presentation was, but that was part of it. And I think, again, the board didn't set any particular agenda for this. We just wanted to get together, and I think that was the starting point.
Okay, if we're looking at something, a work session or a joint meeting, that's between the board meeting and our next plan commission meeting. If the board says we really should do this, can we meet on the 13th?
Well, I can ask the members of the commission. Would anybody check your calendars? Would you be available to attend a work session or a joint meeting on September 13th? It's a Tuesday night. Sure.
I'm more available 13th than I am on the 20th, but I probably would cancel the 20th and be here anyway, so.
You probably would. I know you. Okay.
So 13th for us, I think is,
Andy?
okay,
so. I'm just looking.
And Stephanie, it's not going to interfere with your marriage plans?
oh, I won't be here, so
Oh,
I guess it's not on me. It's not on me. But I don't think for the office, like, meeting, I don't know that we have anything scheduled that day that won't interfere with an election, like
There's all.
last time. So I think it would be good.
Okay, so I think tentatively the commission's indicating we can make ourselves available.
For most of it,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's see if there's an agenda and what needs to be done.
And I think you guys are gonna talk about it at your board meeting, so
Yes.
therefore you guys will decide if you need one. What would be discussed if you do need one.
Okay, that's
That's what I'm hoping at least.
what I'm hoping.
Okay.
And there is not a specific agenda yet.
And is there anything further you want to bring up, Arlen, in agenda item 13, town board items?
No.
Okay, good. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Wait a minute.
I made a
Yes,
motion.
we never did communications yet.
Oh,
What happened?
we skipped communications. Are there any communications?
I do.
I suspected it. was. Andy, what's your communication?
Okay, well, I plan on spending my winters in Florida, starting in November. And I bought a place down there, so it's probably gonna be a norm for me, and I'll be gone 3 to 4 months. So I'm just throwing it out there. You may want to start looking for another replacement for me. I've been on the planning commission for going on 30 years now, and it's probably time I step down. But some new people in anyway, so.
Well,
Enjoy your Tuesday nights.
it's,
Where'd you buy?
Hudson, about 35 miles north of Tampa.
You're not gonna be one of those fans, I.
I want to become a snowbird.
Andy, I believe your term ends.
I honestly, I would have to look back to see when it does
Yeah,
end.
we will check
Mhm,
as to
yeah.
when it is. I think it may be
Now,
this year.
this year,
Maybe, we'll check.
Yeah.
So you,
it would be
You're
an easier
looking-
transition.
I won't be attending the first meeting that I miss will be the November meeting.
Okay.
Thanks for bringing that up.
so that's November through February, November, December, January, February.
Probably 4 months.
March.
Normally it would be 3 this year because I gotta close on November 1st on property I bought. I've gotta be there.
So October would be your final meeting, as you anticipated. Okay, keep that in mind.
Okay.
Any other surprises you care to drop on us?
Chuck, I hate to ask this question, but I'm gonna ask it. Are we gonna go through chapter 8 or are we done going through chapter 8?
Which is what Brian was here to talk to us about tonight.
I don't want to open up, just a yes or no is good for me because I just had a couple questions on things I don't understand and don't make sense to me, but I can do that individually too. And I don't want to do it tonight, so. don't give me
I'll take
wrong.
it.
That would be appreciated if you would be raising them.
Okay, I can send an email out. Mhm, okay.
I think we all need to go through chapter 8 together.
Yeah.
At some point in time.
I would like that too.
Yeah.
But this joint meeting somewhat intrigued me, but I think it would be good to get the board and the plan commission together, even if we're not working on any details, just to hear, I don't want to say the other half, but what the board, where they think we kind of need to kind of go to. So if we have to make changes, like Chuck, he wants to go through detail, well, maybe something revelational come forth that, well, if we want to go down this road that we agreed to at this joint meeting, let's say, or that's kind of the path we go down, maybe we do have to tweak chapter 8 a little bit. So I think it would be good to get together to see where the board is kind of saying where they want to go, because where they want to go is, I think, kind of what we need to support
Right.
at some point.
What,
So I guess for that reason, I kind of am intrigued by the joint session.
okay, wait, if you're doing anything with, the board did say that they would like to have a whole plan recommend that's coordinated, that they can see in not pieces and parts that may have, and make a policy decision on something that's not connected to something
We keep
else.
talking that road, we get back to the chicken and the egg, which came first. So I think getting us together in a room at the same time and hearing their direction, maybe we have a response that they like to hear, they don't like to hear. Right? For that reason, I think it would be good. So we're kind of all can get on the same page. Then I think we get rid of the chicken and the egg and we all go the same direction at good speed.
And Arlen, maybe this is to your point, maybe not, but chapter 8 is what's driving the whole plan. I mean, if we got the details down in chapter 8, all these other peripheral issues are just gonna fall into place. I don't think we'll find disagreement in any of the other chapters. The only contentious area or things that are left undecided are in chapter 8. the land use.
I
That's just my thought.
regarding chapter 8 and the review of it, that was obviously something that we were looking at doing tonight, but you know, ran out of time and got a lot of good information. And I wouldn't say we didn't go through it because that mapping that took up the first hour was exactly that. So we did go through that part, but when you do say we should go through it together, what do you mean? Like word for word, paragraph by paragraph?
Paragraph by paragraph.
Going through and reading it out loud and everybody says something, having everybody go home, mark up their pieces of paper like some of you have done already. And coming back and saying, this is what I got out of the first paragraph, this, you know what I mean? Just so that I can better gauge how much time you're gonna need, whether this is a work session thing, whether this is something that you wouldn't do with the board, probably, that kind of stuff. So what are your wishes?
My wish is everybody would read the draft and mark it up
Okay.
individually. That's
Okay,
homework.
that's your wish, okay?
Next step is what do we do after we've all read the plan and familiarized ourselves with it and identify questions that we still have, that sort of thing.
Together, like identifying the question that you may have brought up to yourselves at home or whatever, and then identifying them kind of in order together, right?
Yeah, in
Is that what
order,
I'm-
like. as
Yeah, like
Sharon is
here's the
saying,
first paragraph. Do you guys
read
have
the
any
numbers.
weird
That's
things
easy.
about the first
1,
paragraph?
2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
We all need to be working from the same draft copy
Yes,
Yeah.
which was the one that you got today.
today.
Yep, because that's
So-
the one that he already did the edits.
Throw the others away. The other drafts, can we throw them away so we're only looking at this
Yes, unless
copy?
you want to compare.
Yes, I think that's safe.
the
Yeah, this is the draft he's presenting to us
Mhm.
so far. And
This is it.
So if we can read through this and doctor this up, so when we come to a meeting where we are gonna go through it, like you say, we can almost kind of go paragraph by paragraph,
Yeah.
That's the way I
half
would leave it.
page by half page, and
That's what I'd like to leave, yeah.
Yes,
Page by page.
okay.
This
Great.
is how this is how I read this and comprehend it. Is that what it means to everybody else?
Right, yep, okay. Yeah, that's great.
Chuck, is there something
Love it.
bigger? Overall policy, or is it a paragraph by paragraph question that you have?
Just basically, I like the way Tim does it. Certain things are clear to me, certain things aren't, certain things don't make sense to me or things and so on. I think if we do it with Tim, the way Tim said, anybody have questions on the first page? No, let's go to the second page. I have a question on this. I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay. Yay. Thank you. That
No
helps
problem.
guide me into knowing if this is something that after you guys have a board meeting, have a joint meeting, if you do have a joint meeting and you're not addressing this, because you will be addressing it, but not how you guys will be addressing it. That September we could do, because we are gonna have some public hearings in September. And if our only focus is on just reviewing it, and then we can just kind of start a calendar from there,
And should we have Brian here?
if you would like him here. And there might be other things that arise from you guys' joint meeting that would need him here for. That's something we're still playing by ear.
No, it opens things up when you let them talk, when you let them talk, which is a good thing, and it has some disadvantages too. We might not be addressing what our questions are. So my idea is maybe once we go through, I lead the discussion, we do our own discussion, and then we can turn to Brian and say, what do you think of this, Brian?
Yes.
Not where he's in charge.
I think all the questions or all these presentations that he's given so far have led you guys to questions as well, which and will make you look at your chapter differently anyways, and will give you guys more questions to be had. So.
And he did know how much a megawatt was, that was.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'll entertain a motion.
I so move.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Anybody opposed? Anyone foolish enough to oppose that motion? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Looking down there a while.
Yeah, that's like the meeting.
Really concrete. Must have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Had to be for in a few months.
They call it.
Fine if I don't.